Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this year's National Student Study Day. It's a real pleasure to see so many of you here today. I understand that we've got over 600 students joining us, which is absolutely fabulous. We'll be starting the session at 9:45 sharp, so be prepared to join us then. And in the meantime, please do contribute to the word cloud by going to menti.com and entering the code 56373471. That's 56373471. And letting us know, what do you most look forward to and what are you looking forward to hearing and learning about today? You can submit multiple answers, as many as you wish, so please do. Thank you. We'll see you at 9:45. Good morning, everyone, and delighted to see so many people here today. My understanding is that we have got over 600 students joining us today, which is absolutely fabulous. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Students' Day. My name is Steve Jameson. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapy. And it is my pleasure today to chair the whole morning. For those who haven't met me before, I'm the fairly new Chief Exec. I've been in post now for 10 months, and part of my role is going out and meeting members and meeting students around the Four Nations. And I've met a lot of students so far, and it's really interesting that the words that are coming up in Mentimeter are the words and the discussions that I've been having with you as students when I'm out seeing you in your universities or in your clinical placements. So some of the real interesting ones that have come up today so far, as you will see, are things like interview tips, being an NQP, looking at that transition process, which is so important for us. And I think throughout today, we will hear how we can enable and help you to go through that transition process from being a student to an NQP. I think that's really important. And also interview questions and preparing for interview is so vital as well. So I hope you'll really get a lot out of your sessions with us today and from the excellent speakers that we've got with us this morning. I've just got a few housekeeping rules and just to walk you through those. So if you haven't done already, please do change your Zoom name by clicking the three dots on yourself and include your name, your university, and either a BSc or MSc. And this will function as your virtual delegate badge, which is really important. A gentle reminder that we will be recording the presentations from this event so that it could be made available on the RCSLT website afterwards. You may use the chat function at any point of the day to comment on presentations and for technical assistance, but please don't use the chat for questions today, as we'll be using Slido, which Jazz will post the link to now. You can post questions here directly and upvote any questions already submitted. We love to see your faces, so please do turn your cameras on if you're happy to do so. You may leave and re-enter the event at any time. The same link you have been issued with you can use multiple times. We did ask for any access needs upon registration, but if anyone would like to mention anything throughout the day, please do have a word via private chat with Hannah Wright, available on the chat as RCSLT host. And she would be more than happy to make any adjustments possible. If you've requested closed captions, there should be a button on the bottom of the Zoom screen to enable this feature. A reminder that student membership is free, and we would encourage you to apply in order to take full advantage of all the resources available to you. Really important. Twitter, or X as it's now called, please do tweet and network throughout the day via Twitter/X using hashtag RCSLT Student Day. We really do love seeing what you've posted and your comments. There also is an evaluation process at the end of the day, which you'll be prompted to fill in. It's really important for us to get your comments back to help us shape the future of these type of events. So please spend some time filling out that evaluation for us. I want to say a really big thank you to our sponsors this year, who are Course Beetle and L-Plan, who are sponsoring the whole student day. They are both specialist training providers that offer a wide range of courses, and thank you very much to both of them. If you'd like to further your knowledge in specific clinical areas, please do have a chat with them during the networking sessions if you're interested in learning more. This is the fourth virtual student day, and one thing we know more for sure is that presenters will receive lots of questions. It can be tricky for us to keep track on the Zoom chat, so please do post any questions you have via Slido using your smartphone or laptop, or scanning the QR code or clicking the link. Hannah will post these in the chat. You can also hit the thumbs up button to upvote any questions. So these are the aims and objectives today. To understand which essential skills and knowledge will be used for the future. And students on our planning group have helped us really shape this day. And thank you so much to the students for doing that. I really want to say a big thank you to Jacob Sheeran from the University of Ulster and Olivia Mitchell from University College London. Our university representatives, I'm pleased to see that we've representation from 24 universities from across the UK today. This is brilliant. And so today's presentations are really helpful to all of you. I really hope that that's the case. And please do stick around for the networking sessions as well. So now it's my real pleasure to introduce our speakers for our NQP panel. I'm absolutely delighted that we have got four excellent speakers who will be presenting to you today. I'll introduce them and then I'll hand over to our first speaker. So our four speakers are Kate Snape from Barts Healthcare NHS Trust, Becca Shield from the Hesley Group, Kirsty McMillan from NHS Scotland Borders, and Ella May, SLT, PAWS Teaching Health Board NHS. So good morning to all of you. And Kate, can I hand over to you first? Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. And my name is Kate. I'm just going to ask for the next slide, please, so I can introduce myself properly. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Student Study Day. So my name's Kate, and I'm an NQP Band 5 Speech and Language Therapist. And I work in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Now, I trained at Newcastle University, who I'm really pleased to see represented here today. And I trained in the BSc Speech and Language Sciences course as the last year of the 4-year cohort of the Speech and Language Therapy degree. And I currently work with children and young people in mainstream primary and secondary schools. Next slide, please. Now, this is just a snapshot of everything of some of the things that I do within my current role. And one of the things that I love the most about my current role is that it's really incredibly varied and no 2 days are the same. Next slide, please. Now, I trained up here, if we look at the map, up in Newcastle University. And then after I graduated, I moved back home to Birmingham. So when I was looking for jobs, I had absolutely no preference, and I had no idea whether I wanted to work with children or adults. And that's one of the questions that you get asked so many times when you're about to qualify or when you're in second or third year, whether you want to work with children or adults. And I genuinely had no idea. So I was really broad when I was searching NHS jobs. But in the essential and desirable criteria in all of the NQP Band 5 jobs that I was coming across, in the Birmingham area and in other areas of the country, had either an essential or a very desirable criteria for you to be a car driver in their person specification. Now, this was a real problem for me because I didn't drive at that point, and I was learning to drive, but I was having issues passing my tests. This was a problem for me because I drive an adapted car, as I have a disabled arm. So I use something called a Lodgson's Lollipop, which you can see there on the screen. And there was only one person in the whole of the West Midlands who could teach me to drive due to that. So this meant that I had real issues with job applications. So there was only one place in the country where I could find Band 5 jobs that didn't have part of their criteria as essential or desirable. And that was in London. Next slide, please. And this looks to still be the case. So when I did a little bit of a search back in October, most of the live job posts on NHS jobs back in the Midlands area were still asking for jobs, were still asking for the person specification for NQP Band 5s to be a car driver and to hold a full driving license. Now, this was a very small sample size, but 9 out of 10 jobs that I looked at back in October still wanted you to have a full driving license and to own your own car. Now, this is something to think about and for you to consider. And it's not just for disabled people. This is for everybody who is a new Band 5, both up and coming and is currently looking for Band 5 jobs due to the cost of living crisis, because this is not something that is accessible for everybody. Next slide, please. So when I was applying for jobs and doing interviews, I did 7 job applications overall. 3 of these were based in Birmingham and had the criteria that I would have had to be able to drive. And some of them were in London. So I removed 3 of the job applications when I had difficulty with passing my driving test. I did actually pass my driving test, which I was very proud of. It was something that I did manage. And other ones I did were based in London without that criteria of having to be able to drive, because there's such a good transport network in London. One of the most successful things that I did was using the STAR technique. And I learned how to do this in some of my later interviews. So down here. And I practiced interview techniques with my friend and family members after I'd had some unsuccessful interviews, which kind of related to, because I was so nervous doing these interviews. And one of them asked me to do a 10-minute presentation on social communication difficulties. And within that, again, I just wasn't very confident in delivering that information. But the interviewer within my current role, so the job that I was successful in, gave me some accommodations. So they gave me questions that were written down, which really helped me because I'm quite a visual learner. And I was also given thinking time before the interview, so I could scribble some notes down on how I was going to answer those questions. I also asked some clarifying questions to the interviewer, so I could see exactly what they wanted for some of these questions. And I think that really helped me as well. Another tip that I can give you is you can ask if you can bring notes into the interview with you before the interview. It's best to ask these questions before the interview takes part, because if you ask these kind of questions on the day, they're likely to say no. And that's purely because there's likely to have been previous people who have interviewed for the post before you. And if they say yes and give you an accommodation that not everybody in the interview pool has had that accommodation, then it's unfair for that pool of interviews. So if you ask for anything that you think might help you before, then they're much more likely to say yes. So that the scoring is fair for that current bout of interviews. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Perfect. So we're just going to have a look now at what my working week looks like. So I work in 3 different schools across the week. So primary school A, I spend 2 days in. Primary school B, I spend 1 day in, and I also have a secondary school that I spend 1 day a week in. So typically my working day is split into half a day of contact time and half a day of non-contact time. So the contact time means that I'm either doing direct therapy with children or young people. I could be doing things like phoning parents. I could be doing things like meetings, which are things like annual reviews for children who have EHCP, so education and healthcare plans, parent meetings for parents who want to meet and discuss something with me or get some resources from me, or just some advice. And I could be doing things like having Senko meetings to discuss the caseload that I'm managing. And all those kind of things count as direct contact time with my caseload. In the second part of the day, I will be documenting what I've done in the first half of the day. I could be planning what I'm going to do next with the child. I could be writing SMART goals and making those resources to hand over to, say, TAs who are delivering some of that therapy to everybody else on the caseload. And for the rest of the week, I pretty much repeat that schedule. So I'll do the same thing on a Wednesday and I'll do the same thing on a Thursday. Now, on a Friday, it's my admin time. So that will be kind of when I'm usually in the office with the rest of my team and the rest of the people that I work with, and those kind of things. On a Friday, I'll be participating in staff training, so that will be kind of my CPD and documenting that within my RCSLT diary. I'll be participating in staff meetings. I'll have line management on there on a Friday, and it was also when I completed my competencies as well. It was on a Friday. And next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit about how I completed my NQP competencies. So I started my job in September last year. So I've been working as a speech therapist for about 14 months now. So when I started working on my competencies, I started with an empty folder, as you can see on the left-hand side. And the only thing that was printed out was a copy of the guidelines. Other than that, the folder was completely empty. And over the year, I slowly gathered my evidence. Now, completing my competencies was something that was a real personal goal, so something that I really wanted to do, and it was also a real professional goal that I was really, really passionate about. Now, during my time as a student, there was a lot of people who knew me in different capacities, who asked whether this was the right role for me and whether I was sure that I wanted to continue with my training. Now, after being in the job for just over a year now and having completed my competencies and signed them off, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, you get a really nice email from the Royal College to say that you've moved from being a newly qualified practitioner to certified. I can now say for sure that this is absolutely the job for me, and I'm now really confident in my abilities to do my job well. Next slide, please. Now, gathering the evidence for your competencies, no matter what area of practice that you end up working in, the amount that you learn within the first year will be huge, and the learning curve will feel kind of insurmountable at times. You'll definitely feel like that little man climbing the mountain there. So there's 5 sections of your competencies that you'll cover and complete within each area of your role. So when you look at the competencies and you look at the breakdown, it can feel really overwhelming, but if you break it down into one piece of evidence at a time, you'll soon have collected a really huge amount of evidence. So I would often look back at my working week on a Friday, on my admin day, and see what I had done that week. And when I would kind of look at it that way, I would see what evidence I would gathered within that week and see where it would fit within the framework. And I would often end up ticking off kind of 5 or 6 things with just one report if it was a really complex case. There's always one area of your competencies that people end up struggling with, and that's okay. That's what your NQP supervision group is for, and talking to your colleagues. And that's how is really good for sharing ideas and how to gather evidence for your competencies. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more now. Next slide, please. So just before I get into the different areas of supervision and the different kinds of management there is when you're working as an NQP, I'm just going to say that the RCSLT has loads of information on their website about supervision. So just down there, it's just an image of what the website looks like. Okay, so there's loads of different types of supervision, and each type has a different reason why we complete that supervision and why it's important. So first of all, clinical group supervision. Now, the reason why we do that and what that looks like is because we have a group of other speech and language therapists within the same banding of us with a supervisor that's more experienced to facilitate that group. Now, the reason why that's good and why it's necessary is because it gives us a space to share and reflect on these interesting cases. And these reflections are really important for us to be able to share the struggles of the role and to also give advice to each other within a really supporting environment. It's a place where we can share resources and help develop our clinical practice. Now, these reflections can be both good and bad things. I think sometimes when we first start, we often focus on the bad things, whereas we should be also sharing good clinical practice and celebrating those and thinking about how we can bring more of that into our daily lives as practitioners and as therapists. So thinking about line management, My manager described it to me as the first point of contact within the chain of command. So for me, line management can really vary. So when I first started my job, my line management centered around reasonable adjustments and accommodations and getting those set up within my job role, as I'm a disabled person. So we worked really hard together to get those set up, and I don't think I would have been so successful in my role and as content with my work-life balance if this hadn't happened. So now my line managements have kind of progressed to general caseload management and general issues like safeguarding that come up. Next slide, please. So just going to have a think about safeguarding. So this is the thing that I wish I'd been told more about as a student, but I think this will really vary depending on which area you go and practice in as a speech therapist. Now, safeguarding sounds really scary, but there's a lot of support and training around safeguarding, especially within the trust that I work in. So within my trust, safeguarding supervision is compulsory every 6 months, and we have to attend. So safeguarding supervision is, again, a safe place to discuss a safeguarding case that is within your caseload that you are managing. We have a template that we discuss, excuse me. We have a template where we fill out a danger scale and decide how concerned we are about the child or young person. We then decide action points that we're going to carry out as therapists and how we're going to implement them as the clinician. And often we work, well, all of the time we work hand in hand with the school or the education setting where this child is placed, and within the parents and the multidisciplinary team. At any point, if we're concerned about a child, we can request a safeguarding supervision within the school day or within the working day. This can then be referred on to the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is known as a MASH referral. If a child is in immediate danger, we would phone 999 and escalate it to somebody like the police. And there's also out-of-hours emergency advice lines that we could call. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now about working within the multidisciplinary team. So I've worked with lots of different members of the multidisciplinary team for different reasons at different times. So this can include SENCOs, parents, teachers, teaching assistants, physios, etc. So there are some really good points and really good things about working with the multidisciplinary team. It often gives you a really holistic view of the child, because we come from our point of view of focusing on a child or young person's speech and language needs. And other professionals come from their specialist point of view. So for example, a teacher of the deaf will be focusing on a child's hearing impairment. And when you're working with an MDT, you can achieve bigger goals because there's more people involved and you can achieve them more quickly. And you often have a wealth of information about the child or young person. Some of the bad things, if you're working with a really large multidisciplinary team, it can sometimes be really hard to coordinate diaries or meetings because everybody's just so busy. And that's just the reality of that. On the flip side of being able to achieve bigger goals is that everybody does have different priorities, and trying to achieve just one set goal can be quite hard. But often, or most of the time, it's really excellent. And it's one of my favorite things is to be working with an MDT. Next slide, please. So final points from me before I hand you over is to talk to your colleagues all of the time and ask all of the questions. No question is deemed as stupid. So for example, it took me 6 months to realise that there was another set of toilets in our office by the colour printer. So I was just waiting for one toilet all of the time. So really silly example, but is a really realistic one. So then really just enjoy it. You've worked so hard to get to this point of qualification and being an NQP, and just enjoy all of the hard work and get into the point of qualification. So now I'm going to pass you on to Becca Shield, and that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Okay, morning everyone. I'm Becca Shield. I'm an NQP speech and language therapist who still gets a huge smile on my face when I get to say that. Okay, next slide, please. I work for the Hesley Group, which is a private service in and around Yorkshire. We specialise in adults with autism, learning disabilities, and other complex needs. And I'm based at our Barnsley service in lovely little Wunwell. We have our Lowlades village. We are a residential village, so we have on-site facilities for our individuals who may not be able to access the community. And I have a caseload of 35. And I absolutely adore that, because no matter what day, no matter what's happening out in the world, I will never increase that caseload amount. We can transition down. So I had 34 up until last week. Now we're back at our maximum 35, and I can keep them all in my head and know that everyone's okay. Next slide. I actually think our logo down there in the bottom is really unrealistic, because it says autism, LD, and complex needs. This is my caseload, and this is just 35 of them. And I will hold up my hands and say that when I was studying, I'd not heard of half of these things, never mind all of them, never mind knew how to work with them. You see in the middle there, we've got Charcot-Marie-Tooth, and down the bottom, we've got Potocki-Lupski syndrome. The individual with those conditions, she is only one of 6 in the entire world. You tell me what evidence base I'm looking at. It is all from experience, it's all from our MDT, and that was just a huge draw for me, because the variety is overwhelming and I love it. Alternatively, I then had a huge learning curve, because I had to go and find out about all these different conditions to be able to interact and actually treat our individuals so that we can enable them to do so much more. Okay, next slide, please. To find my job, I use the Health Jobs UK website. So simple, so easy, keeps all your applications in one place for you. And they're going to do it to us, so why not do it to them? I made my own essential and desirable criteria. What do you guys actually want in a job? I studied down in Essex, but I wanted to come back home. So I was looking in South Yorkshire and the Derbyshire area. Never wanted to work with children, so it was adults all the way for me. I wanted somewhere that would support my NQP competencies. I wanted an area that would still allow me to access dysphagia so that I could complete my dysphagia competencies. And from my assistant days, I wanted to still work in a really strong and established MDT. Then for my desirable, I thought, why not? If I can get somewhere that will transition me to a band 6, why not? I also thought it'd be beneficial if they were taking on multiple NQPs, and we're going to offer many, many opportunities for my CPD. And I got all of these criteria. And that's my big draw to you guys, is that doing this makes it so easy to decide between what jobs. I'd also say when you're searching for a job, search at a time that makes sense for you. I've seen a lot more in-person interviews take place in the post-COVID world. I was still offered some Zoom, but mainly I was always being asked to come to them. Traveling from Essex to South Yorkshire would have been a huge challenge for me, but I knew that I was going to be at home during the Easter break. So I really gunned my applications ahead of that time, knowing that I was going to be at home for a specific week, and just did loads of interviews whilst I was at home. The application process for this job asked for 1,500 words. That's a mini essay. When you've got placement and dissertation and other assignments, you've got to make sure that you're completing an application at a time that it makes sense for you, because you need to put your heart and soul and loads of effort into it. Next slide, please. So the interview process. It sounds really obvious, but research the company. If you Google the Hesley Group, the first 3 words you're going to see are enabling, living, and learning. And I made sure that those 3 words were in the very first sentence in my interview that came out of my mouth, because they immediately knew, okay, yeah, okay, she's at least researched us, she's had a look at us, let's now test her. Ask for a look around the site. I actually interviewed our service over in Doncaster, which is the largest site, but then they offered me 2 choices. They offered me the Doncaster or Barnsley. And I said, okay, well, to be honest, I'd like to also have a look at Barnsley and see what's going on over there. Show some interest, show that you want to see how they work. Bear in mind, however, that if you are going to do that, you are going to walk around site, it then becomes an extension of your interview. I had individuals coming up to me, all very friendly, wanting to say hello. They were then going to watch, how was I going to interact with these people? Never met them, didn't know their names, didn't know anything about them. But they were going to test me as an SLT, saying, right, what's she going to do? Is she going to sign? Is she going to pull up a visual? What is she going to do? So now I'm sure you're wondering why I have a small lizard on my RCSLT slides. Well, this is probably my biggest tip to you guys. Put yourself out there and offer a relevant story. So my interview question, which I felt really confident in asking, what style of communication best suits our setting? Brilliant. Total communication. Theory, demonstrate it first of all. Make sure that they know you know what you're on about. I was then able to provide an example because I'd had an MLD setting placement. So straight away, my theoretical knowledge was in there and I'd got an example. Number 2, sell yourself. As part of our training in Essex, we get our level 1 in Makaton signing. Now I've set myself apart from other candidates because I was bringing something else to them. Number 3, give yourself time to mold into a person, into a clinician, so that you're not just another candidate. I talked about how I love signing so much that I'd started teaching my partner to sign. And his favorite sign is on your screen, Terrapin. Very functional, not dinner, not drink. No, he likes Terrapin. So I told this story and how when we went to the US, he was able to say to me, look, Becca, there's a Terrapin. They loved that story. I loved that story because it made me into me. And I wasn't just a name on a piece of paper to them. I became Becca. And that's your real goal. You don't want to be a nobody. You want to be yourself. So when they come to the point in the interview where they say, have you got any questions? Absolutely have some questions for them. I asked about my supervision. I asked about their person in their team. But I also asked them, what do they think is the biggest challenge for you as an NQP? Are they prepared to take you on? Have they taken NQPs before? Have they done the competencies before? How are they going to support you? When you asked that question, I had 2 interviewers. They sort of looked at each other and went, damn, she's got a bit about her. She's going to ask these hard questions and make sure that you find the role that is right for you. Next slide, please. So my working week, I've put this on here to demonstrate, but in truth, my calendar has turned into a checklist of what I need to do in a week. So we will often have in-service training. So Monday, we had a great day on dysphagia. I have supervision. And when I asked about my supervision in my interview, this was a point that I had to really consider. My supervisor works part-time and in Scunthorpe. So I can't just nip round the office and find her. She's an hour away from me. I can always pick up the phone, but I also know that she's only there 2 days a week. Was that going to suit my style of working? For me, absolutely, because we have such a strong MDT in our office that I don't always need to ask my supervisor. We then have loads of functional activities on site, which I was really drawn to when I walked around here. I saw art sessions, I saw music sessions. Recently, I went tobogganing with an individual. Loads of opportunity for following directions and communication. You can find it anywhere. And I also have NQP peer supervision, which is a lovely way to end our Friday with 2 other NQPs that were taken on at the same time as me. And all well-rounded, I just love my working week because it will never look how I put it in my calendar. I can aim for this. And as long as I get this done throughout my week, I'm happy. But if I don't go and see someone at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, that's fine. I'm not under any pressure to do so. It's my working week. Next slide, please. So I actually waited to start my competencies. So I started my role in August and I've started my competencies this week because I wanted to get myself settled. My company have a 6-month probation period, which comes with its own paperwork that you have to do. So it just felt like too much at the time. So ask about these things, ask what do they want you to do as an NQP, but also as somebody joining their service. So I'm using the RCSLT tool because it just makes it nice and simple. And I've just started my evidence gathering processes. But because I've waited, I've now gone through all of the guidelines and all the competencies, and I can see that I've actually done way more than I thought I would have, and can now just go back through all my notes, all my reports, and just start pasting things in. A lot of our individuals start going home to visit family over the festive period. So we do tend to see a bit of decline in how much therapy we're offering. So it's also a great time for me personally that it fits into my working week or even month at this point. And my absolute final point is know your worth. I remember being sat watching my RCSLT student day and thinking, you make it sound so easy getting a job. You make it sound so easy doing all these processes. But in reality, it's so much harder. It is, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that for you. But the reality is you are so needed and there will be a job for you. Just make sure it's the one for you. Don't take on something that you may like, you may not like. I've heard so many people from my cohort saying, oh, I took it as an NQP, but I'm gonna change once I've got my competencies done. Why? Get established, get supported, know your worth, guys, because you are so valued to us. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Kirsty.
Thanks so much. That was awesome. It's like so nice just to hear about different people's like experiences as they go through their own MDT NQP journey. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me before we get started. So in terms of myself, I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland, and my journey into SLT was a wee bit different. I didn't do it as my undergrad. I did my undergrad in psychology, and then I did a PhD in computer science before I went off to study my SLT postgrad at QMU, Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. And in between going to study there, I'd also worked in schools, some autism support organizations, and I had some research posts. Another thing that I wanted to talk about before I get started about my own journey, I'm dyslexic, and so many people might not be aware that there are many disabled SLTs out in our workforce, including myself, who's neurodivergent. So if any of you are there at home today thinking, oh, maybe I'm not so sure about like, what can I bring? There's so much that support and like what you can bring to the role. So I just encourage anyone there, if you're thinking, oh, should I say, please do, because there's more of us out there than you think. Next slide, please. So I work in NHS Borders. So I've got a wee picture of my base, which is Peebles, on one of the sunny days. There is proof that it is sunny in Scotland some of the time. And I work in the Children and Young People's Community Speech and Language Therapy team. And it's a bit of a full circle moment for me, because Peebles here is where I actually had my first ever student placement. So it feels very nice to be doing my NQP first job here. And in terms of where I work right across the borders within the community team, from IMAV to Gala to Melrose. And I work in nurseries, mainstream schools, what we call enhanced provisions, or what other people might call additional support needs bases, clinics, and I also carry out home visits. Next slide, please. So what does my working week look like? Well, as Kate and Becca have already mentioned, no week is ever the same. In terms of like my job itself, it's split up into roughly about 80% clinical, 20% non-clinical. And before I started learning more about the role as I went on placement and throughout my postgrad, I had maybe quite a narrow view of, I thought maybe what SLT looked like. I thought of a lot of it as being the one-to-one individual sessions that maybe I had seen when I was younger. But actually the job role is so diverse, which I love. So in terms of my individualized interventions that I'm involved in, I carry out assessments, that could be looking at a speech sounds, or it could be looking at expressive and receptive language using formal assessments such as the health. I'm also involved in MDT meetings, which I'll talk a little bit more later, and one-to-one therapy sessions with children and their therapy partners. So that might be parents, carers, and school staff. I'm also involved in carrying out targeted interventions. So recently I just carried out a neurodiversity affirming training with a nursery. And I also am involved in parent workshops where we might talk about what's the typical development for speech sounds and what may be strategies they can do to help develop their wee one speech. And in terms of my universal interventions that I'm involved in the updating our website, our social media accounts, including our Facebook page, which puts out tips and strategies for people who visit. So we have our Top Tip Tuesday, where we have an example of how to develop their little one's language, whether that be look at using eye contact or giving ideas for how to use prepositions in play, We have our sign of the week on Thursday. So if you go on the We Talk Borders Facebook page, you'll see me doing some signs there. And we have our Fun Friday where we post suggestions for activities. So lots of Christmas ones coming up at the moment. And within my working week, I also take the time to write up my competencies. And as Becca mentioned, there's so much that you're already doing as part of your NQP post that you actually might not be aware could count as your evidence. So you could use your anonymized case notes, target sheets, discharge reports that you've written up, a referral to CAMS, or talking maths about what helps with communication. There's lots that you can do. Or you can also use some reflections from your flying start days if you're signing up to that. So there's so much that you can do. Next slide, please. So in terms of NDT working, there's a lot of that in my role. So I work with many, many different professionals, from occupational therapists, physical therapists, music therapists as well. It's a really good part of my job because it helps to give us a more holistic view of what's going on for one child and their family. And it allows us to also share great knowledge and experience. Like I've learned so much, and I'm so lucky to work along so many amazing NDT colleagues within our service. And as we've already highlighted, it's important to think about planning ahead. Juggling diaries can be challenging, so take the time, and planning is absolutely key. And another thing I'd suggest is, before you go in for an interview and as you go along throughout your SLT journey, if you're part of an MDT, find out what their job description is, what's the boundary of their role, because you might be working with a family and they may benefit from that service, or actually the real impact could be better addressed by an OSER. So it's not always necessarily SLT itself. Next slide, please. So what does supervision look like for me? When I first joined the service, I thought, oh, like I would be my one-to-one with my line manager. Actually, it's been so broad. I have my one-to-one supervision sessions with my mentor, who helps get me through my RCSLT NQP competencies. Our service also has weekly drop-in sessions, and peer supervision is a really big one for me. I have my other band 5 who I work with, and we have our own supervision where we discuss each other's caseloads. And we also have an NQP working group within the borders. And I also help run an SLT journal club where we review research papers to help keep our clinical skills up to date. And I've included a link to the NES link, which has more detail on what supervision can look like. Next slide, please. And so how did I find out about my current job? So the service lead for my health board, Alison Downey, came in and gave a talk at my university a few months into my final semester when I was starting to look at jobs. And so for me, that was really useful to hear about what the different boards could bring. And she also covered, very luckily for me, do's and don'ts for interviews. And so I was there writing them down, thinking, all right, okay, that was really useful. And at the end of that, she highlighted that there were going to be 2 band 5 posts coming up. And so I was like a hawk on the NHS Scotland website looking out for those posts coming up. And specifically in the do's for the interview, Alison had mentioned, oh, now if you see a job advert come up, if it gives you contact details at the bottom for someone to contact and discuss the role in more detail, call them up, because if you get an interview, they're going to remember those that phoned ahead and those who didn't. So not only could it help with your application, interview questions, but it also just demonstrates that you're keen. And I think that's a massive asset. Next slide, please. So in terms of my interview tips, as Kate and Beck have already referred to, refer back to the thing itself for the job adverts, note down the values and mimic that language. You can use the STAR technique. I used that and I found it very, very helpful. You've also got the mock interview. I had a mock interview with the University Careers Service, which was so helpful to get out those jitters before I went and had the actual interview itself, which was really nice, and it was in a safe space as well. As I said, if you've maybe got a disability and you need some reasonable adjustments, ask for them. I asked for a written copy of the questions in advance during my application, and so they were available during the interview, which was a massive help for me. So that was one less thing I didn't have to worry about. And at the end of your interview, take the time to ask questions. Anything that you think, oh, it would be really useful to know that, because like they want to tell you about their service, and there's lots of different ways you could then figure out how to show your competencies, like prioritization and for wait lists, etc. And above all, plan something nice for the interview afterwards. Don't sit there and stew and think about how you could have answered anything better. Make sure you got something nice or some nice downtime after your interview too. Next slide, please. Last wee bit of advice, start as you mean to go on. And maintain those work-life boundaries, and finish on time, go home, and celebrate the wee successes as your job comes up. And keep a template of all your CPD and your supervision meetings from when you start as you go along. Check in on that document every week, because you'll be doing more than you think, and it helps save you a lot of time in the long run. And above all, support each other from your cohorts throughout your NQP journey from your course. I've included a little photo of the QMU girls. I couldn't have got through it without them. So here we are on one of our last class days in a beautiful sunny day in Edinburgh. And that's me. Thank you so much. Just going to hand you over to our last speaker.
Thank you, Kirsty. Hi, my name is Ella Hay. I am a speech and language therapist working in Powys in Wales, and I studied at the University of Manchester and graduated last year. And I started my new role in August 2023. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of background about the kind of team that I'm working in. So you can see on the right-hand side there in orange, that is Powys. It's pretty much all of Wales. It's a huge geographical area. And so we have a north team and a south team, and I'm based in the south team. But we work across the whole county. Across the whole county, we have 13 speech and language therapists at different bands. And we also have 7 assistants as well. And in my team, there's 3 newly qualifieds who all started around the same time, 2 band 6s and 1 band 7. And there's been quite a lot of change in our team just as I was starting, as one of the band 6s is on maternity leave and the other band 6 is brand new. So there's been quite a lot of learning about each other and how we all work, and it's quite a lovely thing really, because actually the team can be moulded around our ways of working. I work in a paediatric setting, so I have quite a few different places that I work across the week, and I'll give you a bit more information about that. But I work in mainstream schools, I work in complex needs and special schools. I also do some early years work as well. And then I have one day a month where I work with the neurodevelopmental team, who will do autism and ADHD assessments, as well as other neurodevelopmental assessments as well. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd give you a bit of information about my journey to finding my current job. So I started looking seriously for jobs in January, and I'd look on the NHS website, the Health Jobs UK website, Twitter, the RCSLT website. I was very busy looking for jobs. But I had sort of emailed a few places that I was interested in prior to properly looking, and I'd actually even gone and had a look around quite a few different places, just trying to get an idea of where I might want to work. I knew I wanted to work in paediatrics, so I had emailed the local NHS trust, because at this point I was living in Leeds, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to be moving to Wales or not, so I kind of got in touch with a few different places. But I found this job. It was advertised in February 2023, so that seems really early, and it was quite early. But I applied using the NHS website. Took around 2 weeks after I'd submitted my application to hear back, and I got an interview, which is fantastic. It just so happened to fall on the first day of my final placement. And so I'd say it's really important, if you are in a sort of geographically different area, or if it falls on a day that you just cannot miss, do email them and let them know. My job was really understanding of the fact that it was my first day of placement, and so they were happy to do my interview online, even though, you know, they had actually invited me to come face to face. So do always ask the question if it's easier for you. That's not going to make you look bad if you feel like you would do better in a, you know, in a remote situation, or if you would prefer a face-to-face interview. You know, it's always worth asking. So anyway, I interviewed for that job, and I was actually initially unsuccessful. I had really positive feedback, but I was up against somebody who could start much sooner, which was a bit of a problem with applying so early. But they, you know, it was all really positive, and they said that they really wanted me to apply for future roles. So I felt bolstered by that. It was the best bad outcome of an interview. But then in May, I'd already started looking at some other jobs, both in the private sector and in the NHS, but nothing was really taking my fancy. But they called me in May and said, actually, we've got a job that's the same job description, so you don't even need to interview. It's a permanent role. Would you like to take it? And it turned out I was on the reserve list from my previous interview, and I was offered that job and I accepted it. And so even if an interview doesn't go the way that you wanted it to, it doesn't always mean that's the end. If you have a really good feeling from a place and you did really well at the interview, don't let that put you off maybe applying for future jobs, or, you know, keeping within their radar. And so after I was offered that job, it took quite a while for the pre-employment checks and everything to be completed. And so that was all finished in July. So be aware that it can take quite a bit of time, especially in the NHS, for all of your pre-employment checks to go through before you'll actually start your job. But I started my job in August 2023. Next slide, please. In terms of the interview, so quite a few of these things have already been mentioned today, but I will say the STAR method is really fantastic. So just think about the experiences that you've had on placement, in your part-time jobs, even just, you know, if it's caring for somebody that is in your family, think about those experiences and try and put them into the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, and result. And like I say, and reflection. Really think about what you could have done differently at a different time, or, you know, if you had your time again. And research the trust and company. Yeah, really important. It's already been mentioned a lot today. And yeah, the interviews are a two-way experience, and Becca definitely spoke about this a bit. You know, ask lots of questions and interview them. It's a two-way experience. You know, picking the right team is half the battle, and you have to make sure that you are going to be supported. And I will say as well that all experience is valid. It doesn't always have to be SLT related. If you feel that it shows how you are competent, or that you meet one of the trust's values, but it's not SLT related, that is actually okay. You can use that experience. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit of an idea of what my working week looks like, it's quite similar to everybody else's who have gone today. But I have a newly qualified caseload, which is around 20 children that are mine. That will go up once I'm fully certified. There's a real varied sort of caseload of different diagnoses and etiologies, from, you know, in my day-to-day, I'm doing things like AAC, speech sounds, social communication, emotional regulation, and some more just regular language interventions. On a Monday, I have a clinic, which I run from the mid base, which is in Llandryn Dodd, which is right in the middle of Powys, about 20 miles north of where I normally am. And so I'll see all sorts of different children in that clinic. On a Tuesday, I do mainstream school visits. And again, that's across a really wide geographical area. So driving is definitely a really big part of my role. I'm going sort of probably about 1,000 miles every month. And on Wednesday, I'm based in a special school. And I'll be working on dysphagia competencies as well in there. We do quite a lot of paediatric dysphagia in my team. Thursday is my mainstream school day as well, or one day a month I'll be in the neurodevelopmental team. And on a Friday, I have a clinic in my South base, which is where I'm normally based. And this is sometimes an intensive interaction clinic as well. So a very full-on week. And for admin time and things, you know, I do make sure that I book in time every day. I'll usually do my contact time in the morning and my admin time in the afternoon for catching up on notes and writing up reports and things like that. Next slide, please. In terms of my supervision and filling out my NQP competencies, I will admit now I haven't started my NQP competencies. I'm going to start them very, very soon, but I was in the same boat as both Becca and Kirsty, who said that, we were waiting a bit of time to get used to our role and find, actually build that experience as well, so that you've got something to talk about. But in terms of supervision, I get 1 hour of supervision a week, but more if I need it. Or if I've got a tricky case, I can also go to one of the North teams SLTs if that's their area of expertise. For example, we have an SLT who is a specialist in stammering. So if I had a child with stammer, that I could go to them for supervision. Protected admin time, yeah, so that's my afternoons. I protect that time to be able to do my competencies and my paperwork. My time is very self-directed, so it is really important to advocate for yourself. If you need more time to do some paperwork, allow yourself that time, whether it means you don't go into the school the following week because you've got time, you need to write up your reports. That is okay. You need to try and keep on top of your timings. But the imposter syndrome is real. It's really a struggle for the first few weeks or months of starting a new job, and the learning curve is massive. I'm very open with my team about my struggles with anxiety, and I have got generalized anxiety disorder, and so I find sometimes it can be quite overwhelming, but they are very open. Talk to your supervisors, talk to the team around you about when you're feeling a bit wobbly about things, because you actually will find that you know more than you think you know, and you will always be learning. You don't have all the answers at the start, as much as you might want to, you don't. Next slide, please. So what have I learned in my first 5 months of working? So a lot of the role is around fostering relationships and building trust well before you'll be doing any sort of direct therapy. You need to make sure that people are ready for that therapy. People are ready to accept you. Schools have got, they might have had a challenging experience of not, getting the support they need, or, there's lots of different things that could come up that mean that you do need to build relationships first before you can be ready to do the therapy. It's really important to ask for plenty of shadowing opportunities. If there's any opportunity to shadow an SLT or an SLT assistant, do it, because it's fantastic to see how other people work, and you can take the bits that you enjoy and you can maybe not do other bits. It's really, really helpful. A supportive team is worth its weight in gold, for sure. And you need to learn as well to trust your own knowledge and your intuition. You have got amazing skills. You have been at university for 3 years. Yes, you might not have had that much placement time, but you will still have all that theory in there. So trust the fact that you do know what you're doing. And setting boundaries and self-advocacy can be a real challenge, but it is really important to make sure that you're not taking on too much work, or that you are doing the right thing for all of your caseload and yourself. And then the things that have been more tricky, so caseload management is definitely a steep learning curve, making sure that you're doing all of the things you need to do when you need to do them. So ask for support with that. Put your foot down and make sure that you do get support. Also, it's quite difficult to know when to take a step back. Giving parents and schools consolidation time is just as important as direct input. And that's been a hard one for me. I always feel like I need to do more, or that, there's probably more therapy I can do, but actually people do sometimes need to learn how to do the strategies that you have given them. And so just taking a step back and allowing them to try that is really, really important. And sometimes it's actually just not the right time for therapy at all. If a family is not in the right place, or a school is not able to put in place some of the things for whatever reason, it might be time to take a step back and try again at a different point. Paperwork and admin and time management I've already mentioned, really, but yeah, there's a lot to do, and so getting used to that is also part of why you're an NQP and you're not walking straight into a certified role. You need to get used to how paperwork works for your for your trust and your team. Next slide, please. So yeah, my final points are, be kind to yourself. It is going to be a learning curve. You're not going to know everything, but you are going to know an awful lot. You're expected to know when you finish university a little bit about a lot, and then you go into your job and you are expected to know a lot about a little bit, but it takes time to get there. So be kind to yourself. Know your value, as Becca said as well. It's really important. You are amazing. You've got lots of experience, but your knowledge is also the pinnacle of the current evidence base. You have just been taught how to do everything right at the freshest, level of research. So people will probably be asking you to support them, even if they've been in a job for 10 years, they'll say, oh, actually, could you talk to me about this particular intervention or this kind of assessment? So be aware, you are very much needed. Trust your intuition and just keep asking questions. No question is a stupid question. All right, thank you very much. I think that's everything. Next slide, please, just make sure. Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you very much, Ella, and thank you very much to all of our 4 speakers this morning. Some amazing tips and ideas, and looking at the tips for your interviews, I wish I had had some of those when I was applying for my jobs throughout my career. So thank you, it's been great. What's also come across really clearly this morning is just the diversity in all of your roles, but yet the passion that each and every one of you have for delivering amazing speech and language therapy care to your service users. That was really palpable, the passion you have in each one of your presentations. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure there are lots of questions, and we'll pick up some of those in the Q&A sessions a bit later. Thank you also to speakers for keeping on time. You're dead on, spot on time, so that's brilliant. So we're going to stop for a 10-minute break. Those people are welcome to stay on. Just mute your voice and stop your video, or just rejoin us in 10 minutes. So we're starting back at 10:55. So we'll see you all then. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. Nice to see everyone back. So our next session is our manager panel discussion, and we have got 4 managers ready to answer some questions which I'm going to pose to them. So our managers are Joanne Holder from STEPS Rehabilitation, Sarah Stangroom, who's the professional lead at Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust, Sukdeep Rihal, the clinical coordinator of Camden Language and Communication Service, and Katie Sparks, who's head of speech and language therapy at St. Catherine's School. Welcome all 4 speakers, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this session today. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I hope that those participants in the sessions today will put some further questions to us, which I can ask you later on in the Q&A session. We're really delighted that you're all here, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this for me. So I'm going to start off with a fairly straightforward question: is when you receive an application, what makes it stand out? So I'm going to go to Sarah first of all. Sarah.
Hi, thank you. So I think for me, receiving an application, the thing that really needs to stand out, and the thing that really grabs me, is when there's a real enthusiasm for the role that you're applying for. So I know you're a newly qualified speech and language therapist. I know that you've done these certain aspects of your course. I know all those things about you. What I really want to know is why you want this job, and why you want to work in this particular area, and why you want to come and work with me and with my team. And it's you that we're employing, not a set of skills. So I really want you to come across in that application process. And you don't have to have experience of adult acute. You don't have to be somebody who's had placement experience in that area. What I need for you to demonstrate to me in that application is that you understand that that's what this job is, and what your other experience you've had as a student, and how that applies to it. So if you've had a learning difficulties placement and you've worked with dysphagia, then you've worked with dysphagia. Dysphagia is dysphagia. A swallowing problem is a swallowing problem. It's a situation that sits with a family and a social environment. And explain that to me, and then explain how you think that will fit into the role that you want within my service and our trust. So sell me you. That's what I want to see in that application. I want to get a real sense of you. And I think the other thing that's really important to me is just to say, you know, we know if you're recycling an application. So if you've put in an application to a different trust and you've seen another adult acute job come up and you think, oh, that's an adult acute job at the Royal Berks, I've done one of them before, I'll just put that application in again. We can tell. There will be little tells in that say this is something I've just sort of put in over and over. I'm hoping not putting in job applications over and over. I hope it's much more straightforward than that for you. But from my point of view, just make sure that I know that you know this is the job that you're applying for, that this is my trust, my job, working for us as a service and working with us as a team. Sell me you. That's what I need to see in an application.
Some brilliant hints there. Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to ask the same question to Suki. Suki.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, similar to all the points that Sarah mentioned. Also making sure your information in the personal specification is linked to the role that you're applying for. So very similar to Sarah's point. So for my trust, so if you are applying for a job within our service, so which is the mainstream primary age team, so giving lots of examples of working with children aged 4 to 11 years old, and you know, you might not have loads from your placement, but it might be a role that you did prior to starting the course or something similar. So you might have worked with children in a clinic setting, and that's absolutely fine because there's lots of transferable skills there. And showing your knowledge of working with children with a range of speech language communication needs, and putting in lots of examples of therapy and assessment. And again, you might not have direct experience. If you do, then absolutely definitely put that in your application form, and if not, just all the knowledge that you've learned on the course.
Thank you, Suki. Joanne, same question to you.
So building on what Sarah and Susan said, we really appreciate your applications to be succinct, so reflecting on the sort of desirable and essential skills. As managers, we can get lots and lots of applications for these NQP posts. You know, in previous roles, I've been shortlisting from 40, 50 applications. So the applications which are succinct and to the point are the ones that do stand out, because if we're working with a time pressure and we're having to sort of scroll through lots and lots of information looking for those key points, there is a risk that we miss out things, and you may not be successful in being shortlisted just because there's so much information. It's hard to pull out those essential and desirable criteria. I've also sort of reflected on it. It's really nice if you've called ahead as well, in terms of your application. In the NHS, you don't see the person's name when you're shortlisting, but if you've have had a chat and you've been able to share with us your experiences, or where you're graduating from, what you're interested in, sometimes you can sort of make that link. You're like, oh, I think I've spoken to this person. Oh yes. And that's a really sort of nice thing to feel when you're shortlisting, that you kind of have a little bit of insight into that person already because you've spoken to them.
Thanks, Joanne. And yeah, just sort of following on from that, I totally agree with you. I think it's really important that people ring up and ask a bit more, both about the role, but also about the organisation that they're applying to come and work in. It shows real enthusiasm and interest. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. Kaylee, same question to you.
Hello. So just really to echo what everybody else has been saying, that we know that you are newly qualified, and particularly those that may have studied through COVID times and that placements have been difficult. We know that you might not have as much placement experience as in previous years, but what we're really looking for is for that passion for speech therapy. It's addictive. Speech therapists out there working, we love the job, and that's what we want to see from you. We want to see that pride and that sense of enjoyment when you're talking about what you do know and what experiences you've had. We're also looking for those transferable skills, so things that you might have done in your hobbies and your interests or previous jobs that link to speech therapy, but make sure you back them up with real life examples. So don't just say, oh, I'm flexible, I'm organised. Make sure you link it with an example, because that tells us about you, but it also makes it real. Anyone can just name a list of qualities. We want to know that what you're talking about is the actual real you. And then once again, just make sure you're making clear links to the job description and the organisation. There's nothing worse than in an interview us saying, what have you heard about our school? And people saying, I'm not really sure. A quick Google search would tell you.
Yeah, some really good tips. Thanks, Kaylee. Okay, I'm moving on to my second question now, which is about interviews. That question is, are they all virtual still, or are you doing a mixture of virtual and in-person? And how should students prepare for interviews? So I'm going to go to Kaylee first of all for your response, Kaylee.
Okay, so I am the head of speech therapy at a non-maintained special school on the Isle of Wight, so we're a little bit different. All of our young people that are with us have complex special needs. So there's no kind of lesser caseload for people to work with. We do that through supervision and the amount of support you have. So all of our interviews are face-to-face, and they usually last a whole day. But we are flexible. If you're on placement or it's not the right time, do talk to us and we can rearrange those things. The reason we do a whole day with us is because we're looking for a variety of skills. That formal interview is just a tiny part. We find some people are really good at formal interviews, but some people don't suit that style, but they might be able to show us their skills in the classroom and with a small group, or in a presentation. So we just kind of want to get a feel for you, and we find that the whole day with us means that we get to know you, but equally you get to know us, because taking on your first job, that's a really important big step, and it needs to be right both ways. So like that's been said on the previous question, always ring us beforehand. We put it at the bottom of our job advert. We also put it on our interview acceptance letter for you that says, please give us a ring, and the amount of people who don't. And actually, we want you to do that. We want to talk to you beforehand. We usually, in our settings, set you a small task to do on the interview, and we purposely try and put not too much information in there to open up that kind of dialogue between us over the phone. So if you don't ring us up, then we kind of already are like, oh, are you really that interested in coming here? Look at our school beforehand, have an awareness of what our visions are, what we're trying to strive towards, and then therefore you can work that into your interview somehow. Also have an awareness of the type of students that we have before you come, and ask us questions. So I think one of the newly qualified practitioners that was talking earlier was saying about, if you ask to have a look at the site, remember that's part of your interview. And for us, that's almost the most important bit. It's when you're looking around and you're talking to whoever's showing you around, or if you're invited to the staff room for a cup of coffee, don't forget that's still part of your interview, and it's a great chance for you to find out about the workplace that you're looking at. Almost interview us to work out if it's the right place for you. And finally, just be prepared to talk a little bit about yourself as a person, because you are a human. Believe it or not, amongst all the kind of, I need to remember all this therapy stuff in my head, we want to know you, and you want to know about us. So do talk about yourself, not just about speech therapy.
Thanks, Kaylee, and you're absolutely right. It is a two-way process, isn't it? It's about how much you fit into the organisation and how much the organisation will do for you as well. So it's definitely that two-way process. Same question to Suki.
We prefer face-to-face interviews. It's a little bit different. Our interviews are usually only just an hour long. Sometimes we do have virtual interviews as well. Things to prepare. So really considering the local population and the service that you're applying for. So if we're thinking about applying for an inner city London job, thinking that actually English is spoken as a second language for lots of the children. So really think about that when you're preparing answers about assessment, therapy, and working with children. And I think mentioned, as someone mentioned before, is when you're thinking about your personal skills, really do think about those examples. So instead of saying you're organised and listing lots of qualities, actually what situation shows that you're demonstrating that skill. And I think I've said about when writing your application form, really remind yourself of the ages and stages, different assessments to use, therapy, all the different speech and language and communication needs, and really around the age group that you're applying for.
Thanks very much, Suki. Sarah, same question.
Hi. So yeah, I mean, mirroring very similar things to have been said already, but so we also will now prefer to do a face-to-face interview, and we would bring you onto the hospital site for very similar reasons to sort of what Kaylee and Suki are saying. You know, for a lot of people maybe not having set foot in a hospital before, it's something that we want you to come in and experience, as well as meeting you face to face, because although people often think that might be the environment for them, they do tend to sometimes change their mind when they're actually there and on a hospital ward. So it's really important that they understand the environment that they're coming into and that they're going to be working within. And then, yeah, think really about why you want to apply for this job. Why do you want to work for this organisation? Why do you want to work in this team? And really understand the values and the sort of ethos of the service that you're applying for. And be prepared to sort of be able to talk about that in the interview. What makes this job appealing to you, not just this caseload, but this particular role. But then thinking about the caseload, again, thinking holistically. So like Suki was saying about understanding your demographic. When we're talking about people in acute hospitals, we're talking about somebody who's very much outside of their normal family environment. So we like people to come in to talk to us about the fact that they understand that a person is more than the diagnosis that they're sitting in front of you with in the hospital bed. So really understanding and demonstrating you understand the holistic care of a patient. Really understanding the theory of the area you're applying for. So if you're applying to an acute environment, and like we said before, you might not have had that experience, you do have the theory, you know all that background, so make sure you can sort of bring that into the interview process as well. And then the last thing I think was really important for us is the professionalism. So some of that is what's been talked about, like making sure you've phoned up beforehand, that you've had a conversation with people, but also, you know, if you've been asked to prepare for something, make sure you know how it's expected to be presented. Do you have to, for example, we'll often ask you to prepare a short presentation about something. It's normally about you in some way. But we'd also say to you, can you please make sure you've sent that to us by X date so that we can have it ready for you on the morning of your interview. So making sure you've covered off all those little things like that just sort of add to that whole professional presentation that you want to give off, really helps sort of cement the opinion that your interviewer is going to have of you before you've actually even set foot in the door and said anything. So it's lots of those things that will just add to the overall experience.
Thank you, Sarah. And Joanne, just going back to the question of virtual or in person, and how should students prepare?
So we offer a mix of both virtual and in-person interviews, and virtual tends to be offered for geographical reasons, so reducing travel time for somebody. So in terms of preparing, I echo what the other three managers have said so far, and it's so important to familiarise yourself with that service that you are applying to, what they offer, and what client group is there, and then, you know, preparing for that particular client group. So understanding sort of the assessments used with that client group, what therapy approaches could be used, some of the evidence base. So really obviously tailor your preparation to that service in particular. And again, in terms of sort of practical considerations when preparing, is, you know, making sure you know how to get to the service, you know where in the building your interview is going to be. Certainly in the bigger hospitals, it can be quite a maze to get to the department you want. So preparing ahead practically like that can really help just manage sort of nerves on the day. If you know where you're going, you've got there in plenty of time, and having a pen and paper ready for that interview as well, to jot down aspects of questions. You may not jot anything down, but if you've got that there, it just gives you that sort of space to take a pause before you answer. So those are some of my sort of practical tips in terms of preparing for your interview.
Thanks, Joanne. And yeah, definitely some of those just really fundamental sort of facts before you go there, like where your interview is going to be held and how long will it take you to get there, whether trains or tubes or car journeys included. You know, we've all been recently with train strikes, etc. You have to think a bit more about how long it's going to take you to get somewhere. So all of that planning ahead is so important. I'm going to stay on with the theme of interviews right now and ask my next question is about, when you are interviewing, what are the core skills and the soft skills that you're looking for during that interview? And I'm going to go to Sarah for the first answer, please, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. So in terms of core skills, I think fundamentally we're looking for you to be a good communicator, and we're speech and language therapists. That should be the underlying skill that we have as part of our sort of our bag, our skill sets. So we want you to demonstrate that you're a good communicator. We want to know that you understand the theory, like I said before, around the area that you're applying for and interviewing for. It's probably more or less a given that you're going to be asked something around theory. So if you're applying for a particular area, I think it's reasonable to expect that you've understood and covered that off in terms of your background preparation. We want you to demonstrate lots of professional skills, really. We want you to demonstrate things about, you know, being flexible, being organised. We want you to demonstrate to us that you know where your clinical boundaries and your clinical knowledge are. So you know when to ask for help, you know when you're comfortable and you're safe, and you know when you need somebody to come in and support you. So we really need to be comfortable in that interview that you understand that and that you know where that sits. In terms of your the sort of soft skills, which I think probably are more the things that we're sort of looking for in the interview process somehow, we're looking for you to come across as enthusiastic. We want you to come across as warm. We want to come across as as somebody that we would want to spend time with on a day-to-day basis and have in our team. We want you to show us that you're willing to develop and to learn, and you've got that sort of lifelong learning mentality. We don't expect you to be a fully fledged independent practitioner. We know you're not. And we're not going to believe you if you tell us you are. So we want you to demonstrate to us that you've got the ability to learn. We can teach you the stuff that you need to know in the clinical area that you're coming into. We can fill in those gaps. What we want you to show us is that you've got the potential to be that independent practitioner, and you've got the desire and the enthusiasm to learn and to grow with us in our team and in that role. So that for me is the key bits that we want to hear from you at an interview.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Suki.
Hi. So absolutely similar to what Sarah said, good communicator, enthusiastic, organised and flexible. Another one is really important to show sort of awareness of equality and diversity, and that's sort of throughout your interview and in all the questions that you answer. So what I mean by that is, if we're asking about, you know, how would you take a case history with a family, you're not just assuming that everyone that you're working with will be communicating in English and that you might have to get an interpreter involved. Some of the other skills, so we're looking for someone that's able to work fairly independently, which does sound scary, but it's actually quite nice to kind of get your own caseload. But similar to what Sarah said, it's really important to know that people are able to seek that support when it's required. And then other skills, being able to work in a team, and that's your speech and language therapy team, but also your school team that you might go out and work in. You know, our role specifically is being able to work across different environments, because you'll go out to lots of different schools and needing to form relationships with school staff.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Kaylee, same question.
I think to kind of build on what Sarah was saying, we know you're not a fully fledged speech and language therapist. We're not expecting you to be. What we're looking for is that passion and interest in learning. There's nothing better, I think, in an interview, if you're asked something and you don't know the answer, to admit that you don't know the answer, but actually I might find out through going to here, or that's something I would seek support with. It's much better than making up an answer which is completely off the point of what you've been asked. So we're looking that you understand that just because you're graduating, actually that's when the real learning starts, because that's when you start putting that theory into practice, and it's an ever evolving career. So there's always new things to learn, much more than you will learn at university. And then also just that you're really enthusiastic, and that you have that curiosity, that you want to find out more and you want to learn on the job.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kaylee. And Joanne.
Just reiterating what the others have said. So, we're looking for your communication skills, that flexibility, initiative, reflective skills, your ability to work independently as a team. Also, ability to work under pressure. Some environments come with a lot more pressure, more deadlines than others. But the important thing as well is we can list off these skills, but the important thing, as we've also said in our previous answers, is using examples so we can get a feel as to how you've used those skills in your previous placements or previous jobs or within life. So, if you've shown initiative, tell us how you've shown that initiative. If you've got leadership skills, share with us, an example where you use leadership skills, and it really helps sort of paint a picture as to who you are in sort of the workplace environment or in life. And I think it's really important that you do have an awareness of your learning needs. Like we've all said, we're not expecting you to come to the role knowing absolutely everything. So if there are sort of key aspects of the role which you don't feel that you've got skills or necessarily the knowledge in, it is sort of saying, this is where I could go for that information, or this is how I could develop those skills. And again, that's something to take through your career within all your job interviews, moving sort of into more band 6 posts or band 7 posts. Like if you sort of, there's areas you need to want to do more learning around, it's saying how you'd get to that point. Yeah.
Thanks, Joanne. Thank you. And my final question around interviews is about, and this is an interesting one, what questions do you think candidates can and should ask at interviews? It's always an interesting one. So what do you think candidates can and should ask at interview? So I'll go back to you, Joanne, first.
Sure. I think a nice starting point is about the NQP competencies and how are you going to be supported to complete those. And that question gives you insight into the time that you could expect to get the supervision, you expect to get the support. Another great question is asking about those CPD opportunities and career development. So, is there, normally rotational posts are advertised, but is there scope for rotations if not, so you can get more experience? Is there scope, is the role potentially developmental, so moving from a 5 to a 6? A lovely question which I know Becca asked at her interview was, what do your managers think will be challenging for the post holder? And this question is great to get an idea as to those interviewing you. What's happening on the ground? What are they aware of? Which could pose a challenge to you as a therapist. And importantly, what solutions are in place to help you with these challenges? I always think that's such a lovely question to ask. What projects the team are involved in currently gives you an idea as to sort of current priorities within the service, whether they're involved in research at the moment. And another nice question in terms of sort of interviewing us as managers, what does the interviewer like working about the company? And that can give you real insight into the team you might be going into or the client group. And I know that when I'm asked that question, there's two areas I reflect on, and that is that the team I work in just feels like a family. It feels so supportive. And then the other aspect of that question is that I get to see all this condition, I can do this type of treatment here. So it gives you just a bit more insight as to what your manager really enjoys about their job, and whether this is the team for you. And also, if you've got additional learning needs that need to be considered, if you feel comfortable asking at this point, it's a good time to ask whether how these needs can be accommodated by the team. So yeah, plenty of questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Joanne. Sarah, same question.
Hi. Yeah, so I mean, really, pretty much everything Joanne said has covered a lot. I've been asked the why do you like working with a team question a lot recently. And I think you just need to be prepared for the fact that we generally love doing our jobs. So you might find that part of the interview actually takes quite a bit of time, because we'll tell you everything about why we love working within our services. For me, I think another important thing for you to understand and to perhaps ask about is to understand the structure that you're coming to work within. So what does the team structure around you look like? How many therapists would you be in contact with on a day-to-day basis? How many sort of share an office with you? How many are going to be off-site? How regularly do you all get together as a service? Those kinds of things give you an idea of how the whole service works and how the whole thing sort of bleeds and meshes together. And can give you a real sense of how that team functions, almost like Joanne says, like a family. You know, who are the direct family members and who are the distant cousins, and how does that all work together and sort of mesh to see with you sat in the middle of that and how you'll be supported by them. So for me, that's always a good question to ask, to understand how you sit in the service.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Suki?
Hi. So firstly, just to note that it is okay if you don't have any questions, because we do know that it can be really stressful after an interview, and your mind might just go blank, or you may just have had all the information that you can take at that time, and it's okay to email us afterwards. You might want to say, is it okay to email any questions I have after the interview? And that's all absolutely fine. If you do have questions, then real genuine questions to find out more about the service, because it's a good time, it's a good opportunity for you to find out whether that service and that role is right for you and right for your first job. From our point of view, it can be quite difficult to answer really specific questions. So if you're asking, how many children will we have on your caseload, there's lots of different factors. So maybe just thinking of more general questions around that.
Thank you, Suki. And finally, Kaylee, for this one.
So we love it when we're interviewing, if people ask what our typical day is like. I know it's been mentioned previously, but there's two kind of parts to that. One, as a manager of a service, we typically love our job and love what we do, so we love talking about it and sharing it. But equally, you as the interviewee get a sense of what is it actually like, because if you ask that at the end of an interview, interviews are kind of a stressful process for us as well, and we're often concentrating for a long time. So if you throw in what a typical day is like as a question, you're likely to get quite an honest response of, oh, actually, okay, let me think. I did this and I did this and I did this. And it gives you a sense of how does that job actually work, and what will actually be expected of me and of other people. Also, the setting we're in, we're really fortunate. We get to run lots of projects and lots of research. So it can be, if you're in kind of a smaller setting, it's quite nice to ask what's happening at the time and how are you contributing towards that evidence base, because again, that shows a real interest in the place that you're interviewing in.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Kaylee. I'm moving on now to talk a little bit about SENS. So SENS, for those people who aren't aware, are clinical excellence networks. And they're just really a welcoming and, excuse me, supportive network or professional groups that offer access to low-cost, high-quality continuing professional development. And we have a number of SENS within RCSLT, and we do encourage student members to become part of that. They provide, for me, a real valuable opportunity to network for colleagues across a range of experiences and expertise. And also, I think a membership of SEN is a great extracurricular addition to a CV, and also around how to help people develop in their careers. So I think it's a really important group or network, and I would really encourage those people who are not members of SENS to think about them and contact us to understand a bit more and how you could become involved. But I guess my question to the panel is more around, are you aware of how SENS or networks have helped students in the past? And if you do know, could you maybe tell us a bit more about that? I'm going to go to Joanne first. Joanne.
Yep, thank you. And yeah, to reiterate, they are absolutely fantastic places to network and improve your sort of skill and knowledge set. And I had, as a student and even as an NQP, I had significant imposter syndrome, which actually prevented me from accessing them. And in hindsight, I really wished I'd sort of joined a few earlier in my career. So my experience with SENS, I actually set up and chaired the Mental Capacity Clinical Excellence Network. And we, from the start, have had an agenda as to what we want to achieve with this SEN. And part of that is to shape and influence education for students in mental capacity. So we actively encourage you to come along to the CPD events that we offer, to get in touch with us with any questions, because they bring together people who've got the same interests and specialisms as yourself, and they're a great forum to learn sort of about who is available across the sort of the nation, as it were, to support with any sort of queries you may have, and different perspectives from you know, so many different speech and language therapists. And they offer great CPD opportunities, which are often quite affordable as well. Some events can be free for students, they can be free or significantly discounted. And just being on a mailing list gives you an idea as to what is happening. So I'm also, as part of the ABI SEN as a member, and they regularly send out emails with various courses which are being offered around the country. So as a student as well, so you get to, on your course, you learn a little about a lot. These SENs are a really great way of learning a lot more about sort of specific areas that you may be interested in, especially upon graduating.
Yeah, really helpful. Thanks, Joanne. Kaylee?
So I spoke to some of my colleagues who were Band 5s, and they were saying that when they were at university, they would meet up with a couple of their other students and go together to some of the SENs, and that they actually found it a really useful opportunity to meet other speech therapists and network, but also a great form of CPD for them. And when we were talking, we were actually saying, actually now so many of them have gone virtual that they're so much easier to access for everybody. And they were suggesting you could still have a bit of a group session all together, so you didn't feel like you had to go on your own, but to get together and just access a few virtually. Another great way is on social media. If you're on LinkedIn or through Twitter, and you don't feel confident enough to talk about it, but you can kind of just sit back and see what's kind of coming up. And actually some SENs are getting created on social media now. So I've actually joined one linked to relationships and sexual education, because that's a big part of my job in a special school, and that's actually come about through the media. And so if we weren't on kind of LinkedIn and that, we would never have found that SEN.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kaylee. And Sarah?
Yeah, I don't think I have a huge amount to add to what these guys have said already, really. I really resonate with what Joanne said about sort of imposter syndrome and feeling like it's not something that you should actually be a member of just by definition of what it's called, you know, as an excellence network or a special interest group, as they used to be called like way back then. And you don't have to have a particular burning desire to know about a certain area. Join lots of these groups, get on lots of the mailing lists, because although you might not have an area that you might not be massively interested in mental capacity, for example, from Joanne's SEN, but there might be something that they do as a study day that comes up that really piques your interest, and you can dip in and out of them for those kinds of things. And that's where Twitter is really useful, like Kelly said, just to lurk in the background and see what's going on and keep an eye out. So yeah, definitely even if you don't want to be there and even fully engage with them, know what's about and keep an eye out, because there's lots of really useful information.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And certainly when I'm out meeting students, a number of students have said that they've now joined SENS and a number of SENS, and it's more of just about getting an overview of all of the SENS and finding out which ones, you know, really attract them, how they can become interested in them. And some of them have said they've gone on to be much more actively involved in a specific SEN because they've been able to pick and choose. So I think it's a real plea from, I guess, from all of us. We're all saying really positive things about SENS. So for those people who haven't heard of SENS or are interested in what we've just said about them, then please contact us at RCSLT. We'll put the details on the chat so that you can find out more about the SENS and how you can become involved. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, I'm moving on to my next question, which was an interesting question, but it is, what do you expect from an NQP day to day when they're in post? So that's an interesting one. And I'm going to go to Suki first of all for this one. Suki.
Thank you. So this may be very specific to sort of a mainstream school caseload, but yeah, so initially you'll sort of have your induction period with an opportunity to do lots of therapy, shadowing with therapists, and completing your corporate and in-house induction. And throughout that period, you get lots of regular supervision. And then, as I said, within our service, you'd then be given your own sort of set of schools, school caseloads of children to work with. And I think I've mentioned previously that the number of schools you have and the number of children on that caseload can really vary because, you know, there's lots of different sizes of schools, complexity, etc. So, you know, typically within our service, the therapist will visit a school in the morning and then they'll go back to the office or work from home in the afternoon. So you've got a really nice mix there of sort of meeting up with your speech and language therapy colleagues, but then also going out and working with lots of different children. Some of the larger schools we have, you might share that caseload with a more experienced therapist, which is obviously a great opportunity. And then some schools you'd be their only link therapist. And again, that's a brilliant opportunity to work sort of independently and have your own caseload. But, you know, saying all that, as a newly qualified therapist, you get lots of frequent supervision and additional time. So as a band 5, we're not expecting you to do everything exactly the same as a band 6. You will have more time and supervision to support you in your new role.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Suki. Kaylee.
So our setting again is very specific, so I apologise for that, but to explain kind of it's quite similar to what Suki's just been saying. You would have a small caseload, so smaller than we would expect other therapists within our setting who are more experienced to have. So for us, the maximum would be about 16 students that you would have for that year working with. Initially, we would be supporting you with any group sessions. So you'd be kind of watching, taking part, and then slowly building into taking over from that more experienced therapist. But we would be expecting you to deliver one-to-one therapy and assessment sessions. You receive weekly supervision within our environment with your clinical supervisor. And then you would also get half-termly supervision from your manager. We would be supporting you to plan your sessions and deliver your sessions. And to start with, we kind of expect quite detailed plans and to be thinking about stepping up and stepping down and showing us explicitly that you know how to do that. And we'd be there helping you. And then as you progress, that paperwork becomes a bit less. As Suki was saying as well, that you would have more admin time as a newly qualified, so we build that in. But we differ from kind of everyone else that's been speaking, linked to schools. We have our caseload all day. So our young people are with us from 9 until 3:30, and our boarders are there into the evening. So you might work kind of in the house up to like 5 o'clock with those residential students. So we're a bit more flexible about when our admin time happens. It's not kind of in a big block. It's kind of spread out throughout the day and throughout the week. And then as we've had newly qualified therapists that we've taken since they trained during COVID. So our most recent newly qualified, who's just finished her competencies, she actually did her whole training through COVID. So she only ever did one placement, and that was a virtual placement. I think it was a very new time of learning, and so we have completely changed the support that she received, and we kind of worked with her to build up her knowledge more so than we would expect of a newly qualified. So I think it's just really important to know that managers know that COVID had this huge impact, and it's still having an impact kind of on placements and what you can and cannot do. But we're very aware of that, and we are adapting what we expect of you and the support we give you in response to that.
Really helpful. Thanks, Kaylee. Sarah?
Hi. Yeah, I think Kaylee makes a really important point actually about the fact that we, you know, your job role will essentially be tailored to you, not your job role, but your induction and your development in that post will be tailored to you and your needs. But broadly, we'd be expecting that you'd really be doing very little independently in the first instance. So you would certainly have a 2-week induction to the service, but you would also have a further induction to the trust, which normally lasts another week. We'd then be doing lots of joint working with you initially. So you'd be working predominantly with another therapist. And then within that, start to take on a very small caseload of your own. So our band 5s within our trust tend to sit within our stroke service. So you would be working in a contained unit with 2 other therapists who are working in that environment as well. And they would work with you on a day-to-day to support you with your planning and your organisation of that caseload. And then really gradually getting more and more independence as you go along and are becoming more confident and feel happier in the environment. And we would use a lot of the NQP competencies to help you guide your development. So we would be asking you to sort of look at those with your supervisor, to think about where your learning gaps are, what things you need to develop. And we'd be using all of those different things to help you settle into your role and build to be running your own caseload independently. In terms of admin time, again, within an acute trust, it tends to be very, very flexible. So it would very much depend on sort of caseload demands, but we set out specific amounts of time through the week that we will allocate you for certain things like completing your NQP competencies, for other CPD, for supervision. All of those things will be sort of allocated across the week, but that might be a flexible week by week discussion in terms of what it looks like. But yeah, very much a supported settling in process.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Sarah. And finally, Joanne.
Yes, so again, I echo what Suki, Kaylee and Sarah have said, and can expect a really highly structured sort of first month before having any sort of more autonomy with sort of diary and time management. And really, in those first sort of few weeks and months, it's about familiarising yourself with the processes that exist within the environment that you're working within, be it the admin processes and note writing processes, because they're all there to sort of ideally make your life easier and for the service to run smoothly. Other things to expect in your induction processes in most environments as well, it include things like the mandatory training, manual handling, safeguarding, infection control. So those, you may have a day out to do that. It could be e-learning, it could be practical sessions, and those sort of exist across different environments that you work in. The important thing is having time out as well to consolidate. So time will be built into your day to reflect on sessions that you have done, and as a supervisor, I'd be sort of steering you as to what to look at in specifically. So rather than, okay, let's look at the whole session, look at this aspect of the session, reflect on that, give me your thoughts on what we could potentially do next. So giving you a lot of structure in the initial stages, and again, regular supervision initially, sort of weekly for NQPs.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. So my next question is around what support NQPs expect from their supervisor. Now, I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to ask each of you just for your top 2 bullet points, really, because we've got a couple more questions to get through. So can I go to Sarah first of all? So what support NQPs expect from a supervisor. Sarah?
Okay, my top 2 tips then are that you should have a supervision contract. So at the beginning of that supervision relationship, you should understand what that is and how it works and how it's going to work between the 2 of you. And my other key point is that your supervision should be about your clinical learning, but it should also be about your well-being and how you are in your job and in yourself and in your role. Because if we don't manage that as well, then you're not going to be happy and you're not going to develop in the way that you would want to and we would want you to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. Joanne, top 2 points.
Top 2 points. So to be able to have open and honest conversations with your supervisor in order to raise any concerns and challenges earlier on. So the sooner we know about it, the better in terms of us being able to support. And also an induction to the team. So you know who to turn to for support if your direct line manager is not available.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Joanne. Kaylee, top 2 points.
So support with timetabling and managing your time, because that's something new that you won't necessarily have had to have done before. And also support with the general running of kind of your department and paperwork and things that need to be filled out that aren't necessarily directly linked to speech therapy. So things like your safeguarding and how to manage those.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Suki.
So top 2 are ask for more opportunities if you feel you need them. So, you know, if you want to shadow more therapists as you get more into the role, definitely just ask for those opportunities. And if you feel like actually your supervision isn't working as you kind of expecting it to, then not to be worried about talking to someone about that. So either another manager or a more experienced therapist.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, I guess for me, just to say that the networks and the groups within RCSLT and our professional development team, for example, are here to offer support and guidance and help as well to everyone. So use RCSLT as well, which is really, really important. Okay, my next question is about working as part of a multidisciplinary team and how you have found it. I'm going to ask for what you've learned from it, but I want maybe one real positive and one real negative from each of you, if that's okay. And I'm going to go to Kaylee first of all.
Okay, so working in a multidisciplinary team just means that you're working with colleagues who aren't just speech and language therapists, it's everyone who's involved with that young person or adult at the time. And the positive impact is that you can learn so much from everybody else's role and how you all interconnect and you all rely on one another in terms of your own development, not just being specific to speech therapy. And I don't really have a negative, I'm afraid, so you'll have to move on to someone else.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kaylee. I'm going to move on to Sarah for that. Sarah, positive and negative if you have one.
So positives is, you know, we achieve more in partnership than we do on our own. So if you're working with your colleagues, you gain so much more for your patients. For me, they're patients because they're sick and they're in hospital, but our clients are, you know, the people that we're working with. For me, it's the negative. If there's anything negative about working with a multidisciplinary team, it's that it's not so much the negative as a learning thing. You have to learn how to work with other people and to manage other people and manage competing priorities. And that's all part of our development as clinicians and as leaders. So it can only be a good thing, but it can be challenging.
Yeah, and you also learn from managing and working with those other professionals, don't you, as part of that MDT? That's the key thing, but sometimes it takes a while to understand how other professions work within the MDT. So yeah. And finally, Joanne, on this one, a positive and maybe something not so positive.
Sure. I was going to raise that actually I work in an interdisciplinary team, and IDT and MDT are often used interchangeably, but there are core differences between the two. So within an IDT, the team is working collaboratively in an integrated manner to reach a common goal. In an MDT, you're often working sort of independently, creating plans specific to your discipline, which works independently of others. The positives of this are the sort of skill set and knowledge base that you develop from taking this approach. But the negative, so there's a lot of blurring of boundaries with IDT working, and this can be a negative as well. So knowing when something is definitely outside of your scope and being able to say no. So I think for an NQP, going into an IDT can be challenging in terms of the blurring of role boundaries.
Joanne, and I think that's it for time. I'm going to have to stop, but really thank you so much for all of your input into this. We are going to stop for a 10-minute break, so it's now 10 to 12. So shall we start back at 12 o'clock, 10 minutes break? Okay, I've just been told 11:55, if that's okay. So I've got a very strict timekeeper here with me today, so that's brilliant. So if we can start back at 11:55, the next session is going to be a panel answering your questions. So please use Slido to ask us any more questions, or the QR code that's in front of you. And when we come back, I will start asking the panel the questions that you've put in to us this morning. So I'll see you all back in, well, at 11:55. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 11:55, and delighted that we've got so many people still on with us, which is fabulous. So this is the part where we're going to do a Q&A session with the questions that have been submitted via Slido to us, and I'm going to ask the questions. I would really like the panel, both of the NQP speakers, but also the manager panel. If you're happy to answer one of these questions, could you please put your hand up, and I'll come to you for an answer, if that's okay. There we go. I can see you all, which is great. Thank you very much. I'm going to start with the question which is about, where are jobs advertised? Can anybody help me with answering that one, please? So the question is, where are jobs advertised? Becca.
So like I said in my panel, the Health Jobs UK website is so useful because you can search via area. So if you have an area in mind, you can really narrow down your search. I would also say Twitter, or X as it now is so huge in our profession. I still see loads. I've followed various trusts, various companies that I knew were in my area, and they still post things now. So if you have something in mind, start following the key people in that field and you will see stuff come up.
Brilliant, that's really great advice. Thanks, Becca. Kirsty?
I was just going to say, so specifically if you're looking for a job in Scotland, the NHS Scotland jobs website is a great place to filter down. And if you're looking for a specific area and you're going to be looking for a band 5 post, you can see through that list where the jobs are coming up. But also just to advise as well that I found that when I was in the final months of my course, individual trusts, including different organisations such as private trusts, etc., were actually emailing our course lead to say, we have a job advertised that's going to be posted soon. Can you please share with your students? So it's worth bearing in mind that you might hear about jobs in indirect ways. So have a chat with your course leader if you haven't already and see if that's something that could be an option to you.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. Thanks, Kirsty. And Joanne?
So I work in independent practice in the private sector, and going sort of direct to their websites is a good point, a good sort of starting point for the private sector.
Brilliant, thanks, Joanne. And Kate?
Hi, so NHS Jobs is a really good place to start if you want to work for the NHS. A really good tip that another speech therapist told me is that you can widen the search via postcode. So I think it's set to something like 20 miles when you first do a search, and you can widen it, I think, up to 50 miles via your postcode. And often you'll only get 1 or 2 jobs come up first of all, and you will then get many more. If you've got the capacity to meet that travel requirement up to 50 miles, that's often quite useful. Also places like Indeed for the private sector will post jobs. that's also a good place to start.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. Actually, one of the other questions that came in was there seems to be very few Band 5 jobs being advertised on the NHS job website in adult neuro. Do you have any tips for entering a job with this client group? Joanne.
So I'm in adult neuro, and it's what I wanted to do from the outset of becoming a speech and language therapist. My starting point was working on acute medicine, and this is the point where you can see a huge sort of range of conditions, including neuro. So for some neuro clients, it's their starting point of getting a diagnosis, and it gives you an absolutely fantastic foundation to then work in adult neuro and rehab.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Joanne. And Sarah?
Yeah, so similar to Joanne, there aren't huge numbers of jobs in adult neuro because there aren't huge numbers of jobs out there. But I think if you want to work in that kind of client group, then getting into any kind of adult post as a starting point is a good one, because you are going to be coming across, like Jo said, those caseloads, those patients with undiagnosed neurological disorders. But I think also if that is really where you want to work, then my advice to you would be sit tight, hold out, wait until you see the jobs that you want to go for coming up, because they do come up. They might not be there as regularly as sort of some of our paediatric colleagues' posts, but they are out there. And if you're prepared to sort of look a little bit further afield from your, where you're living currently, and you're prepared to hold out, then that is probably the best thing for you to do, because they'll happen.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. My next question is about when and how disabled and neurodiverse students or NQPs should request support or reasonable adjustments, not only at work, but when interviewing. Anybody willing to take that one? So when and how disabled and neurodiverse students, NQPs, should request support, reasonable adjustments, not only at work, but when interviewing. I've got 3 hands up. I've no idea which hand came up. 4 hands up. I've no idea which hand came up first. So I'll go to Kate first.
Yeah. So personally, I disclosed my disabilities at the interview stage or during the application. That's because I can't hide my disabilities, and it's something that I was happy to disclose during the application stage. I didn't tick the box during the application stage that I wanted to be interviewed if I didn't meet the requirements. That's just because I didn't want to be interviewed for a service that didn't have any intention of hiring me for a job post. So that was just my personal preference. But I wanted to be upfront with the employers right from the get-go that I was a disabled individual and a disabled speech therapist. Right from the start, because it's something that I can't hide, and I wanted to be open right from the start of the application process. And it may be controversial, but I wouldn't want to work for a service who wouldn't be willing to employ a disabled individual and make those reasonable adjustments and accommodations. Because as everybody's kind of been saying throughout this process, it is a two-way street. You've got to want to work with the people who are employing you, and they have got to want to make those reasonable adjustments and look after your well-being. And it's a really big part of your supervision and those kind of things. But yeah, everybody's kind of nodding and agreeing, so I'm glad managers are agreeing with what I'm saying, and it isn't that controversial.
Brilliant, thanks. That's really helpful. Thanks, Kate, for sharing that. I think Ella was next. Ella, you put your hand.
I put my hand down because I think Kate just said it perfectly, and I wasn't going to add anything different. Just, I think that you should try, if you are able and feel happy, to disclose at the application stage, because of the fact that you wouldn't want to work for somebody who isn't going to put those things in place. So that's all I was going to say.
Brilliant, thank you. Kirsty.
I was just going to say, so as the girls have already highlighted, you can, if you feel comfortable, highlight any disabilities or what your reasonable adjustments would be. I know specifically from my own experience, the NHS Scotland website has a section towards the end of the application process where it asks if you have any long-term conditions, And then there's an open-ended box where it says, if you require any reasonable adjustments at the interview, what would those be? So that's quite good in terms of there's specific things that you know yourself, like getting the written questions in advance, etc. But I would also say as well that normally what happens is if you get invited to an interview, you'll have a contact, and you can then contact the interviewers if you haven't already, to if they haven't addressed that, ask, oh, will I get this, or would this be possible? So that's also good, just as part of the whole different stages and where you can seek support.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. Sarah?
Hi, yeah, so I mean, for me, we would like you to tell us as soon as possible. So if you don't feel happy disclosing it in your application, then we really, really want to hear about it at the point that we interview you. And for us, the reason is that your interview is not a test. We're not trying to put you under the spotlight. We're not trying to set you up to fail. We want to get the best out of you in that interview process. We want you to succeed. And if we need to make adjustments in order to help you succeed at interview, and then within your time with us as an employee, then that's what we'll do. And I do completely understand why people feel that it's not something that they might want to disclose. It makes me really sad that that's how people feel, but I do understand it. For us, you know, for me, our differences and our diversities and the things that make us unique are what make us brilliant as a profession, and bring us together and give us that that edge, that understanding of how society and how we all work as human beings. And we want that in our team, and we want that in our service. And if we as speech and language therapists cannot support people who need adjustments in their work life, then something's gone very wrong in this whole process. So for me, if you're applying to our service, then please tell us. We will do everything we can to make the adjustments for you. Now, we can't guarantee they'll be perfect. There might be a learning curve. There might be things that we have to adjust and come backwards and forwards on. But our objective is to set you up to succeed. And we can only do that if you tell us what it is you need to help you succeed.
Thanks, Sarah. Sounds a great place to go and work. Kaylee?
I was just going to add that we want you, and we want you to do your best and be your best, be happy and feel supported. We don't have like a model therapist in our mind of who we want and what they can do and how they do it. And so we want to do anything we can to help. But also remember, you're joining a team. So within that team, there will already be people who have adjustments. Everyone does stuff in different ways or needs different equipment or technology to help them be successful. So although it can feel like you're on your own and it's a real nervous thing coming to your first interview and sharing that, actually, yes, you are on your own, but you soon won't be. You'll soon be in a team where everyone is different, and that's a wonderful thing, and you will be supported. And I'd say I completely agree with Kate. If I was interviewing and somebody didn't have that reaction, that wouldn't be a place that I'd want to work either.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Kaylee. Okay, moving on to my next question, which is, when would you suggest to start to apply for jobs? Who's going to take that one for me? Ella?
I think it's really up to you. I think it depends on your own personal situation. Sort of as Becca said in her presentation, that, you know, it's dependent on your life experience and what you are going to do next. For me, as a mature student with a young family, I knew that I needed to try and get into work as soon as possible after graduating. So I did start looking very early, but as I said in my presentation, that actually hindered me a little bit, because when I came to, you know, have a successful interview, there was somebody else who was ready to start before me, because I was so early and wasn't graduating until July. And so it does depend. Some jobs, if you were the applicant of choice and there wasn't somebody else, you know, they would wait for you. But I'd say that it's completely down to when you need to start working, and if you've got a specific role that you have your eye on. For me, it was this team that I really wanted to work for. So as soon as that job came up, I was like, yes, I'm going to apply for it. It doesn't matter that it's February. I just went for it. And also it's worth having a discussion either by email or over the phone with the hiring manager as well, because I emailed them in February and said, look, obviously I'm not graduating until July. Would you be happy to receive an application from me? To which they was like, yes, please. So, it's always worth us having that conversation with a hiring manager. If you see your dream job and it's really early, email them or phone them and have a conversation with them about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Kirsty.
Yes, so you could, like, from my own experience, I was able to start looking for jobs a few months before I graduated. So I got my HCPC registration in August 23, and I applied for the job I'm in now in February 23, and the interview was in March, and so I had that time. But it's worth, if you're not sure, oh, is there a bit of a wait? Email or contact the trust, as we've talked about. Contact whoever is advertising the job first and say, I'd be expected to get my competencies in this month. Would you be willing to interview me? This is what my situation would be. Because many, like myself, were able to start at a band 4 before my HCPC registration came through. So it's worth checking out that beforehand, because that very well may be an option for you.
It is. It's very much about being proactive, isn't it? And taking that, even though you're not ready for it, it's about letting those people who are the employers, let them know that you're interested, and when roles come up to let you know about them. I think it is about being much more proactive. So thank you for that. My next question is, are we at a disadvantage if we have not had a specific kind of placement, for example, applying for an adult acute role, having not experienced this on placements? Kate and then Becca. Kate.
So I personally had very few pediatric placements during my university days compared to the amount of experience that I had within the adult sector, just because of the way that it fell pretty much. So my university took into account the kind of things that we wanted to experience. So I had placements in an adult mental health ward, which I absolutely loved. But there's very few jobs coming up in kind of the adult mental health world. There was one that I did apply for, and I didn't get to the interview stage. I think possibly because I'm disabled, and things like kind of manual handling and being able to break out of a chokehold, which I wouldn't have been able to do because I've got a disabled arm and stuff like that. Which I fully accept. If you can't do part of the job description, then you're not going to get to the interview stage. But it did mean that when I was kind of applying to jobs, I did look at, as I kind of mentioned in my presentation, I was very open to working with both children and adults, but all of my experience was kind of skewed towards adults, and I'd only done one child placement. I'd done the one that was mandatory for everybody on my course, and then I ended up doing one more after that. So when I was kind of thinking about what experience I was kind of present in my interviews, and kind of thinking about that STAR approach, what experience have I got to think about in interviews, I was sat here thinking, how am I going to apply for child jobs when I've got very little placement experience, and everything that I've done is skewed towards adults. And in very specific settings, so kind of dysphagia, adult placements, mental health wards. I did a learning disability placement as well with adults. But a lot of that stuff is transferable over that you've experienced with adults to children, and children to adults. And all of the stuff that you've learned as well during your course is transferable over. I think a lot of the managers were talking about all of these things earlier. When you're thinking about situations, take stuff from your daily life. So I used to work in Sainsbury's, and kind of conflict resolution, working in a supermarket. That's something that I talked about in my job, because that's something that I did every day. So I talked about that in my interview. That was one of the STAR approaches. That was one of the questions that I talked about in my interview, and other stuff. So transfer all of those skills. If you've only done one placement, then there'll be loads of stuff that you've done. If it was a virtual one, again, loads of stuff as well within that. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Kate. Becca.
I mean, quite similar to what Kate said, but I would actually say you're not at a disadvantage. Play to your strengths. When I was writing my applications, I had the job spec, the person spec, and all of my experience, and would just play a matching game. If I'd not seen something, what had I seen that was similar, or what had I been taught? What had I done about it? I applied for something in voice, and I used to be Joanne's assistant. We did Vox programs. That was my only real tangible experience in voice therapy, but I was able to link that really nicely in. So whatever you have, as long as it is relevant, I think that's the key thing. If you have done it, experience is experience. So if you want something very specific, you've got a whole wealth of this overarching umbrella that you've been taught or have experience that you can still use.
Brilliant. Thank you, Becca. And Sarah.
Sorry. Just picking up on what the guys were just saying there, really. For me, I guess it's what I was saying before when we were talking about, we can teach you the stuff that you need to know about working in an adult acute environment if you haven't got any of that experience. And even if you have got that experience, you will still have a huge amount to learn. So it's about selling us you and you as a clinician and why you're excited about that environment and why you want to work in that environment. And that's what will then give you that advantage as part of your application or as part of the interview process. And our most recent Band 5 that we employed earlier this year, of the applicants that we interviewed, she had the least amount of experience in terms of her placement within that adult client group. She had a very, very pediatric background, but she did such a good job of showing us those transferable skills and explaining to us why adult was the thing that she wanted to do, that it made her interview process and her application process just sort of shine out above all of those others. So I think it doesn't put you at a disadvantage. I think you really just have to focus on what is it you want to do and sell us you in that process. Don't worry about your placement experience. Don't worry about whether you've ever seen that thing before. If you really feel that's the thing you want to do in your career, then go for it.
Really helpful. Thank you, Sarah. Joanne.
So yeah, just to echo the importance of demonstrating the transferable skills and transferable knowledge, and also maintaining in mind we're going to be taking on to do a job, and to do that job it's about motivation, reflection, willingness to learn, the motivation to learn, and those are the key things. So it's highlighting how you'd come into the role and would go about getting and acquiring those skills with our support. So I don't think it puts you at a disadvantage by not having the experience from placement.
Great, thank you, Joanne. And that leads us on quite nicely to the next set of questions, which is about how easy is it to shift specialism in the NHS? I was working as a PEDS Band 5, then wanted a job as Band 6 in adults. Would I have to start fresh Band 5 in adults again before I could get that Band 6? It's an interesting one. Sarah, I'm looking at you. I know you haven't got your hand up, but I'm wondering what you think. And
okay.
then Kirsty, sorry, Sarah, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. So you might, in all honesty, have to, if you've been working as a Band 5 in paediatrics for a long time, and you decide that you want to go into adults, then you might need to start again as a Band 5 in an adult environment. There are a certain amount of transferable skills that you can pull across, but it doesn't take away the fact that some of the underlying clinical knowledge is what's needed to work as a Band 6 in any environment, regardless of how brilliant some of your transferable skills might be. What we've done in the past when we've looked at people moving from paediatric into adults, particularly if they're moving from say a Band 6 paediatric job and want to move into a Band 6 adult job, we've done a sort of transition thing for them. So we might say, okay, fine. Okay, fine. That sounded really like, all right, fine. you know, you're moving into a different environment. We'll support you in that transition, but we can't move you straight into that in a band 6 and have you working at that band 6 level, because there's a level of independent practice that we expect from you at a band 6. So we might suggest that we move you in on a transitional basis. So we start as a band 5 with a 6-month set of you know, competencies and skills and things that we need to build on to transition you then into that band 6 role. So I think it very much would depend on where you're coming from, how long you've been in that area, what skills you've got already, and where you're going to. The thing that I would say is like we were talking about in the whole interview process before, in the application process, is phone the trust, speak to the service lead, speak to the people who are working in that area, find out what they think is realistic. We're always, as clinicians, really keen to tempt people over from the other side. So if you're a paediatric therapist and you want to work in adults, we'll want to try and bring you in. And similarly, our peds colleagues are constantly trying to steal ours. So yeah, it's not impossible. It might not be smooth. There might be some conversations that need to happen around it, but nothing's impossible in this context. If you're the right person, then we'll make it work somehow.
Reassuring. Thank you, Sarah. Kirsty.
Yeah, Sarah summarised the key points there. I mean, it's about having those conversations, but I am aware that, for example, with a few colleagues who are within different boards within Scotland, one was working in an adult acute setting and then has transferred back to a paediatric community role. And so, as you say, it's about having those conversations. And if it's something where you think, actually, I would like to maybe, as you say, go to the other side at some point within your career, it's not impossible, but it is about having those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you both for that one. Next question is, mature student NQPs, how much were employers interested in your past experience? Should I mention this in applications or concentrate on my clinical experiences? Ella. Oh, I've got lots of fans up here. I'll go to Ella and then Suki. Ella?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a mature student, as I mentioned before, and I'd done quite a few different roles before I started doing my SLT degree. And as we've already touched on it a little bit, especially Kate, you know, I did mention some of my previous work in my applications, and I've since spoken to my line manager about it, and she said, oh, you know, well, it actually made you stand apart from other clients, because I worked in HR before. I did, I mean, I had a few different jobs, but one of them was HR. So again, conflict resolution, mediation, working with difficult conversations, things like that, you know, all really, really relevant to working in the community paediatric role. And so, yes, absolutely, you should mention it if it's relevant. You know, definitely mention it. It can set you apart from your from other candidates.
Please. Great. Thanks, Ella. Suki?
Yeah, as Ella said, definitely mention it, because we're always looking for, you know, a diverse range of people, and coming from a different background in terms of, you know, having done a whole different career and job beforehand, or even, you know, being raising a family. That's really great. That just sort of offers lots of different skills, lots of different insight, you know, and really supports your application and also your interview as well. And, you know, as Ella said, just make sure it is relevant and you're just pulling out all those transferable skills.
Thanks, Suki. Kate?
I haven't got much to add, but once you are successful and become part of the team, you do have these kind of conversations with different members of your team, and you kind of figure out what you've done in your past life and what kind of transferable skills you've got, and you work out who, as part of your team, you tend to go to for different problems. So, for example, there's certain members of my team who are really good at fixing EMIS or note-taking system, and you'll go to and ask those kind of questions, or who are really good at fixing general IT things. And you talk about what your previous skills are. So as I kind of said before, I used to work in Sainsbury's, so there was a running joke that I could help people fix the self-scans amongst our team. So all of these kind of things do come up kind of in the application stage. So because I used to work in Sainsbury's within the past 3 years, they knew about that. And it was one of the things that kind of delayed my application and starting within the NHS, because Sainsbury's didn't give them a reference for a really long time. So it kind of delayed me starting my job. Yeah. But these kind of things are really useful to know about, and they are transferable skills, as we've kind of just said.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Joanne. You're on mute, Joanne.
Sorry, thank you. I just thought I'd add sort of my own personal experience to sort of including information within applications. So I was a mature student when I went to university and graduated, and my experience before becoming a speech therapist did include 2 attempts at university, one of which was to do physiotherapy, which wasn't for me, and I was so worried about including that on my application, and then having to explain why I hadn't finished those courses. But it was received positively, especially the fact that I have a whole year of physiotherapy under my belt as well. So I think it's pulling from your experiences, the skills that you've taken away from that and how they can apply to your job going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think the next question that's come up, I think we probably answered it throughout our sessions this morning, but I'm just going to pose it again to see if anybody has anything else to add. And it's, aside from academic achievements, what else makes us stand out during interviews and our application process? We've covered quite a bit already, but is there anything else we'd like to say on that? I guess we talked quite a lot about just being open and honest and our personalities, etc. today, but there's a couple of hands up. So Ella and then Kaylee. Ella.
I was just going to say that I did mention about my own family as well in my interview, because I have got a daughter who is autistic, and so I spoke about my own personal experience of raising an autistic child, and so it sort of did help to set me apart in a way, because I could talk about the real personal difficulties and challenges, but also the wonderful things about that, and going into a pediatric role where you're going to be dealing with parents who are going to be at the start of that journey, definitely helped me stand apart as well.
Yeah, thank you. Who did I say was next? Kate or Kaylee? Sorry, go on, Kate. Go on, Kate.
Any kind of volunteering or mentoring that you've done in the past. So I used to volunteer in a domestic violence women's shelter, and all of my team was really interested in the fact that I'd done that, and I didn't actually put it on my application form. And it's actually, we did training on that, and kind of it's part of safeguarding and some of the training that we did, and I just happened to mention it, and everybody was like, why haven't you ever told us this before? Once I'd started my job, and I did that for kind of 1.5 years in a previous life when I was doing my foundation degree in health and social care. It was part of my degree, so a foundation degree that I did previously, and it's really something that's really benefited me when any kind of safeguarding cases come up as part of my caseload. So anything like that. Like I also used to mentor as part of a youth theatre, which those kind of transferable skills that we just don't really think about. And again, I didn't think to put that on my application, and they would have really been interested in that. So there's loads of things that are just part of your general life or stuff that you did previously that would be really helpful in an application process, I think.
Yeah, indeed, that's really helpful. Thanks. And Kaylee.
It's about not forgetting that you're a person, and particularly as newly qualified, we know that you've all had a similar sort of training and education. Yes, and you've got your experience, but one of the questions we pose at interview is what can you bring to our team that is nothing related to speech and language therapy? Because it's a busy environment, it's stressful, and we really value well-being and hold well-being sessions, and we want to know what you're like as a person. So don't just tell us what you think. The amount of people who say, oh, I really enjoy walking and reading, and you're like, okay, unless you're like an extreme hiker, that would be interesting, but tell us what you're actually interested in. I'm interested in making loads of cakes that I can bring you. I'm interested in, I don't know, dance-offs, like anything that's just interesting and tells us about you, not just what you think we want to hear.
Yeah, Good stuff. Thank you, Kaylee. All right, moving on to my next question, which says, is it frowned upon to take a break after studying before applying to roles if you don't want to go straight into work? I've got, I probably know the answer to this one, but Suki and then Kaylee.
I mean, yeah, the short answer is no, definitely not. You know, when you come back to applying for jobs, you're going to be much more enthusiastic about applying and the whole process. And sometimes you just want to do something else after the demanding course, and that's absolutely fine. Just, I think we touched on it before, just keep in with all the sends, social media, just so you're keeping up to date with what's going on in the speech and language therapy world.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is, I will have had only 3 placements at the end of my BSc course. How can I get more placement training? Kaylee.
I'd say, first of all, I think everyone's kind of talked about it. Don't worry about having more placement training if you're doing it for job applications, because you can draw on so many other skills. If you're doing it because you want to find out where you kind of sit and what you enjoy doing, then just contact people. We have people contact us all the time and just say, I'm on holiday during these times, can I come in and see what you're about? And that's a great way as well of then, when jobs do come up, if you're still interested, you've already made contact. But I'd say just contact people and see if they're happy to have you, even just shadowing for a day.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm just going through our long list of questions. How long do you have to find a band 5 role before you lose your HCPC status? Are you sure about that? Kate, and then Ella.
So you can register as a newly qualified, not practicing registrant on the HCPC register, which I did. And then you can upgrade your registration and say that you are practicing. So you get a lower, you get charged less if you say that you're not practicing currently. It's either the HCPC or the Royal College that does that. One of the two. I don't know if somebody else who works for the Royal College can answer. It was definitely one that you can register with and say that you're not currently practicing, which I did when I first qualified, when I was currently doing job applications, and you get charged less for that. And I don't think that you lose your HCPC registrant, yeah, at all. You can definitely inform them and say that you're not practicing at the moment for a while.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And any questions around that as well? Tom, who works in our membership inquiries desk, will be able to answer all of those questions. So we'll put his details into the chat as well for you. Ella, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah, so when you apply and register with the HCPC, you get 2 years before you have to renew it. And in that time, you can be practicing or not practicing. It's only if you're if you're not practicing for over 2 years that you would have to then go through a re-registration process, whether you have to provide evidence, but, you're unlikely to be out for that long anyway. And that's after having started your first NQP role. So you have quite a big window of time to find that first role.
Great, thank you. I've got a hand up here from Francis. Francis, would you like to?
Hi, yes, just wanted to jump in from the RCSLT perspective on that question. Exactly as Ella has said, so from the HCPC side of things, you do have 2 years, so the re-registration is every 2 years. So that gives you that buffer time. But from the RCSLT membership perspective, you can be in the NQP non-practicing category until you find a practicing role. And it's just really important that as soon as you do get your first role, that you get in touch with us to update that membership to the practicing category before you start your work, and that just ensures that you've got the insurance cover as well. So just wanted to clarify that.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. Thanks, Francis, for doing that. My next question, this might be for you, Ella, actually. This question says, I've seen that jobs in Wales require Welsh speakers or list it as very desirable as a non-Welsh speaker who trained in England, how do I navigate this?
Yeah, so I don't speak much Welsh. I speak a little bit of Welsh, but my trust and all the Welsh trusts will pay for you to do a Welsh course, and that can be in work time or outside of work time, and they are comprehensive courses. So don't worry if you don't speak Welsh and you want to. I do think it is really important. We do have some Welsh stream schools now where, you know, it's Welsh first language, and you should be doing those assessments in Welsh or with a Welsh speaking translator. And we're really lucky in our team that one of our assistants is fluent in Welsh and Welsh first language, so I will always take her along with me to do an assessment. Yeah, you know, there is provision there available for you to learn Welsh, and especially like in Powys, you know, there's not that many Welsh speaking children, but they do exist, and we do have Welsh stream schools as well, and so it's a really important skill, but you can get support to build on that skill, so don't worry if you don't speak any Welsh. It still apply.
That's really reassuring. Thank you. Kate?
I don't work in Wales. I work in inner city London, and as Suki was saying earlier, the borough that I work in is Tower Hamlets, and inner city London has a really high level of bilingualism. And working with interpreters is something that I do pretty much every day of the week, because it has such a high level of bilingualism and English is taught as a second language. So just working with interpreters was a point that I wanted to make, that it's something that speech therapists often have to do. And it's a skill that I've kind of developed as an NQP. So I just wanted to raise that point.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. Okay, I'm moving on to another question. How to access evidence-based current relevant research publications as an NQP with no longer affiliated with the university library? Obviously, at RCSLT, we have a research team which you can discuss and contact and get some advice and some more support with them around research. But I just wonder, I see some hands up as well. So I'll go to Kirsty, Becky, and then Kayleigh. Kirsty.
So it's worth checking out depending on which trust or board you're with. For myself, even though I'm no longer at university, I'm able to access and open an Athens account via an NHS login. So you can still access the evidence base for when you start practicing. It's also worth, Twitter can be very good. For example, I'm going to take a pediatric example, DLD. There you can find some quite good accounts where maybe they post little summaries of recent research papers, so like DLD research, DLD mouse, and that's a really good one to like keep up with, like up-to-date things that are happening in a particular field. And also I'd say check out the RCSLT if there's an updated position paper. We've recently had some consultations on the speech sound disorders and CAS. So there's lots of different ways, and if not, I'd contact your board and see if there's a librarian and who can help with that.
Thank you, Kirsty. Becca?
So working privately, it's slightly different because we don't have huge trust libraries. What we do have is a specific organizational login that we can all use. But I'd also recommend when you do start your job, learn the institutes or organizations or associations that are relevant to your patients or your clients. So I have Down Syndrome Association, British Institute for Learning Disability. They're all on I'm on their mailing list. So if they have any updates, if they're currently doing any projects, we get those updates. Then you also have the SENS. I think the last 3 team meetings we've had different members of our team go to various different SENs, and then they've provided us a comprehensive summary of what's been talked about at that SEN. So there are still opportunities for you to stay up to date. It's quite easy to do. I was really nervous about it, to be fair, when I joined, and my caseload was so out there that I'd not even heard of most of it. I really missed my university login immediately, but there are places, and your team will point you in the way to go.
Thank you, Becca. Kayleigh?
We are independent, so we don't have a big trust library and things like that. We use Informed SLP, which is a website. You do have to pay a subscription, but they have lots of research articles on there, and they provide summaries which you can also listen to. So that's just a really practical way of getting in some CPD. Also joining your local hub So at our school, we're part of the RCSLT South Central Hub, and that just connects you, particularly where we're on an island, it connects us with lots of other speech therapists all in the South Central area, so you can kind of share resources and tap into other people's kind of knowledge that way.
Thank you. Joanne?
We also tap into university resources just by sort of association of taking students, so that enables us to access university libraries as well. So that's another sort of point to consider in different trusts.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to let everyone know that in the meeting room after the session, this session closes at between 1 and 2, there will be members of RCSLT research team and members of our inquiries team in the rooms as well. So you'll be able to ask them lots more questions about those 2 areas. So that will be after this session closes at 1 o'clock. So thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to back to some more questions. Let me see. One here is, what advice do you have for anyone wanting to do a year abroad as a speech and language therapist, especially within an NQP year? Anyone want to ask that around sort of working abroad? Sarah, and then Becca. Sarah.
Hi, so yeah, I'm not so sure it's advice as much as just, so we have in the past had therapists who've gone and done an NQP or some of their NQP year abroad before they then come back to work within the service. And it's provided them with loads of really valuable experience, and it's been really great. The real challenge that they've had is finding somebody who isn't in this country who will be able to support them from an RCSLT competency point of view. So what we've found is that they've gone away and worked sort of 6-8 months abroad and come back, but almost had to start from the beginning in terms of their NQP competencies and that competency process. Certainly just in terms of having somebody who is an RCSLT member who can supervise and those kinds of things. So I wouldn't discourage people from doing it at all. I would just say to look into the process in terms of where you're working, who's around you to support you, and just be very aware of what implications there might be if you're then planning to come back to work within the UK after that. Because, yeah, it just took a little bit of feeling through then, because they'd been working abroad very independently, which was fine. They had loads of great skills that they were bringing back to us, but nothing that they could evidence for their competencies. So we sort of had to start that bit from scratch, which was a little bit challenging it's frustrating from their point of view to sort of have to go through that process. Having said that, I wouldn't discourage you. I'd just say make sure you know what the implications are going to be when you come back to the UK and want to work here.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Sarah. Becca?
I'd be mindful of your level of study. So you have the mutual agreement with various other countries. If you're on the masters, the BSc doesn't meet that level of need abroad. And many countries also have entrance exams that you'd have to pass in order to legally qualify over there. In terms of coming back, HCPC have just introduced their AHP preceptorship, which is a really nice return to work program, I guess, that a lot of trusts and private settings are already starting to integrate. Firstly for NQPs, but also for people who maybe have come back from maternity leave, they've had a job change, a role change. So that might also be something to look for when you're coming back to the UK.
Thank you, Becca. And as I said before, Francis and the inquiries team will be able to answer some more questions after this session, if that helps. And also within our professional development team, the number of policies that we have around specific issues such as this, we'll be able to get those to you if you ask for them. So really happy to help in any way we can. The next question is a really interesting one. It's, how do you find your client group? I'm struggling to know which group I want to work with. Kirsty.
I mean, first of all, I'll say I'm a bit biased because I work in pediatrics. I love working with children, young people, and their families. I love working in partnership with them and those around who are also in their life. I just can remember when I was doing my student placements, I had a mix of child and adult ones, and I loved each and every one of them. and like I learned something different from all of them. For me, it was just that thing. I think you'll get a feeling when you start to apply for jobs, like you think, oh, would I apply for one here? And I think if you're just going, I'm not so sure, if there's one where you go, I would love this, and you just get that feeling, I think trust your instinct and then you'll know. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Good answer, thank you. Becca and then Kate.
Completely agree with trust your instincts, and you will get that feeling. It sounds really cringy, but when I was walking around my undergrad university, I got that feeling from it, and I knew that's where I belonged. And I got the same feeling about working in LD. But I would also consider what excites you. What do you see yourself wanting to research? You know, if you've done a project at uni where you had to just pick something, what did you want to actually look into? Because at the end of the day, it's you driving down the M1 at 7:30. You need to actually want to be driving down the M1 at 7:30 to get to that goal. It needs to be the thing that you want to get out of bed for.
Indeed. Thanks, Becca. Kate?
When I was a student at university, I really didn't know whether I wanted to work with children or adults. And every time I was asked the question, oh, children or adults, I had absolutely no idea. So even when I got to the end of year 4, I still didn't know. And I was kind of getting to the point of applying for jobs. And I was still applying for both children and adults. And it was only when I was kind of thinking about what really do I want to do, and I was kind of in the position of this person who's asked this question, where I was like, I really don't know. I just really just want a job. I just want to start working. I want to get into the workforce. I really don't mind. And it wasn't until I kind of was doing the interviews and I was meeting different speech therapists and meeting the teams, and I kind of got that feeling of, okay, actually, I think I could do this job. Like, I like the people here. I like the network. And when you're kind of reading the job posts, it was the clinical support, it was the description of the job, kind of what your week would look like, those kind of questions that you're asking. If you could see yourself doing that job role, like I ended up moving from one end of the country to the other for this job role. And it was because I could see myself being happy in this position. So just like other people have kind of said, yes, like if you can see yourself doing that and see yourself doing this job and being happy doing that job, then that's when you kind of know. And that's the most important thing. Like one of the things that really attracted me to the job that I was currently in was the support network, and the fact that I felt that I could really make a difference in this job role because of the level of need within inner city London. And I thought we'd actually really enjoy it. And I was absolutely right. So the question of adults or children didn't actually matter. It was all the kind of other things around what makes a job worthwhile that actually really mattered to me. And was I right that this job was right for me? Yes, absolutely, at the end of the day.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Kate. And Sarah?
I think it's just really important to remember as well, you know, this isn't a lifetime commitment that you're making with your first post. As we've touched on before, you don't have to pick a route and stick with it. You can change your mind. You can spend 5 months, 6 months in your first job, realize this isn't the area that you really want to work in, and change. You know, people will understand that in application process. And if you're explicit so if you're worrying about looking like you've done 6 months and then moved on really quickly, if you're clear in your application process about why that is and what it is you're doing, then people understand that. You know, you're not getting a tattoo. You're not going to be stuck with it for life. You just try it, see if it works for you, see if that's the right environment. I agree with what Kate said. You look for all the other sort of extraneous stuff around the role as well, and the other things that fit for you. But it's not a lifetime commitment. So if you make the wrong decision, it's fine. Move on, look for something new.
It's a really important point, Sarah. Thank you so much. We've got time for one more question. And this question is, we know that SLT caseloads can be very large, but as an NQP, do you get a full caseload immediately, or do you receive clients gradually? This is someone who's obviously thinking about the workload immediately. Kirsty.
Yeah, don't worry. If you're in a good supportive environment, they are not going to throw you a whole caseload to full capacity as you jump in. it's important to remember, as we've said today, you're not expected to know everything. You're likely to start off with maybe a few children, say if you were in pediatrics, and then work it up from there. But that's something that's discussed as part of your supervision and your line manager in terms of like your capacity and like your own development as you're going up, and then as like the needs change. I'm certainly relieved that I didn't have a full caseload when I first started.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. Kate, and then Ella. Kate.
So as managers have kind of said before, you have your induction period, first of all. And that involves kind of trust training, statutory and mandatory training. I think Suki kind of gave a very good overview earlier of what kind of a clinical induction looks like if you're working in mainstream primary schools. But for me specifically, I kind of did all of that induction process, and I kind of felt like I wanted to get straight into schools. So I was kind of talking to my manager, and I was like, when can I kind of get in and get going straight away? So I was very keen to start. So personally, I was given kind of my 3 schools, and I liaised with my manager and said, when can I start? Like, I really want to get in and get going with my caseload. So the way that it works for me is that those 3 schools that I see in the week are mine to manage. But you may be given kind of those 3 schools, and then you've got to kind of prioritize those children in terms of who has the most need that you need to see first in terms of pediatrics. So either way, you might have a list of 20 children, but 10 of those are fine and you don't need to see them straight away. Managing a caseload is definitely a skill that you learn throughout your NQP year. And who to see first in pediatrics is something that I had to develop along the way. So there's no research specifically in speech and language therapy about how big or how small a caseload could be, because you could have 3 children who are incredibly complex and you can't manage those 3 children and it feels like you're almost drowning. But then you could have a caseload of 100 children and a therapist feels absolutely fine because it's all about the complexity of it. So depending on numbers, we can't sit here and kind of tell you a number game of what is manageable and what isn't, because it depends on so much around the complexity, the supervision around you, like and the level of support. But as an NQP, it's kind of all about how you prioritize that caseload, and that depends on how you work with the MDT around you, how you structure your time, and those are all kind of skills that you develop. Personally, when I first went into a school, I kind of spoke to the teachers, I spoke to the Senko, I spoke to parents and was like, who are you worried about? Who do you want me to start with? Who needs the most support from your point of view? And that's the way that I did it in my schools. And then I developed those skills of prioritization. But yeah, just to reiterate, like, we can't kind of give you a numbers game because that's really dependent on the caseload.
That's helpful. Thanks, Kate. And Ella.
I mean, Kate said pretty much exactly what I was going to say, so thanks for that, Kate. But I will say from my own personal experience, I was really similar to Kate as well. And I was like, I had a whole month of shadowing opportunities and seeing how all the therapists were doing things, and I was there chomping at the bit, really wanting to get going. And so I said that to my line manager, and she's like, great, okay, let's find you some schools. And she did. And I ended up with 20 children. And I must admit, I found it really overwhelming to start with, but I then said that after I'd sort of got myself going a little bit and gone, oh no, this is actually far too many for me right now. They were quite complex as well. That I had that conversation with my line manager, and she was like, right, fine, let's take some away, And so it was really very much an open conversation, and it's about understanding your own confidence and your competence levels, and that confidence doesn't equal competence, and neither does competence equal confidence. So it's about knowing how you feel, your own experience with that client group, with those children. I have got interesting complex needs, but I don't know that much about how to help those children. So, you know, being given 20 quite complex ones was really, really difficult at that time. So it's about being open and honest with your supervisor. And if they've got your back, which of course they will, you know, they will totally understand that, and they will help you to manage that and learn the skills of prioritization and time management and caseload management.
Hello, thank you so much. And just thank you to everyone for your really informative, both for those people who've asked questions and for the team who've answered those questions. This has been an amazing 1-hour session. I want to say a really big thank you to the NQP panel, to Kate, to Becca, to Kirsty, and to Ella. I want to say a really big thank you to the manager panel, Joanne, Sarah, Suki, and Kaylee, and to our sponsors who have really supported this session today, to Elclan and to Course Beetle for supporting and sponsoring the day and providing their courses to support the needs of NQP. So a really big thank you to all of them. We're now obviously coming to the end of this session. I did say at the beginning that we do have an evaluation form, so it's really important that you do that, and you can scan that on your screen right now. It's really important for us to get your feedback on today and how we can improve these student days moving forward. So please do take some time to fill in for us as well. So we're going into a break now and until 1 o'clock. After 1 o'clock, there'll be this networking session between 1 and 2 where you will meet the NQP speakers and the managers. And you can also speak to the RCSLT research team and to our inquiries team, who will be able to give you advice on any areas within those key areas. And you'll be able to pop in between rooms, which is really helpful, and move in and out of those rooms, and those rooms are now up on the screen for you as well. Feel free to grab some lunch at any point. Just move in and out of rooms. The rooms will be open until 2 o'clock. And for those who need to head off, thank you so much for attending today. It's been my first student day at RCSLT, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been great to hear the enthusiasm, the professionalism, and the work that you're all doing. And thank you for those people who put the questions forward to us as well. I just wish all our students all the very best. And just to remind them that RCSLT is here to support you throughout your professional career. And so please join us, please be part of this organization that can help all of the profession of speech and language therapists to continue to thrive and move forward and develop. It's been a real pleasure to be your chair today, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.